All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank the school board for joining us again, and the council. I think this is our third joint meeting that we've managed to do in a row here, so it's great. We'll keep planning these. Thank you to those who are joining us in the room and on the Zoom as well. Chair Bison and I are going to call the meeting to order, and then even though it's not on your agenda, just because we don't meet very regularly, I will ask that we go around the room and everybody introduces themselves before we actually open it up. So with that, it is 6 o'clock, and I will call to order the joint meeting of the McMinnville City Council and the McMinnville School Board on June 17th, 2024.
Good evening. I call the special called Joint City Council and McMinnville School Board work session meeting to order.
Thank you, and we'll go this way. I'm Remy Drabkin, Mayor, City of McMinnville.
Jason Bazan, Chair, McMinnville School Board.
Kelly Minke, City Councilor, Ward 2.
Justin Queen, City Councilor. Doris Towery, McMinnville School District School Board.
Sal Peralta.
Gerardo Partida, McMinnville School Board.
Debbie Brockett, Superintendent, McMinnville School District.
Jeff Towery, City Manager.
Susan Muir, Parks and Recreation Director, and our guest.
Joshua Todd, CEO, Campfire Columbia.
Carson Benner, School Board.
Chris Chenoweth, City Councilor.
Larry Vollmer, School Board.
Zach Geary, McMinnville City Councilor.
Luann Anderson, McMinnville School Board.
Adam Garvin, Council President.
Abby Warren Bear, School Board.
Thank you, everyone, so much. I will just remind us all to talk into our mics. We do have people joining us on Zoom, and this is being recorded and broadcast, etc. So we want to make sure everyone can hear the full conversation as it unfolds this evening. And with that, I will turn this over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Susan Muir, to introduce the topic and reintroduce Joshua Todd from Campfire. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, school board members and city councilors. Again, my name is Susan Muir. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And before we get started, we found an error in the staff report. So Claudia emailed one out about 2 hours ago, I think. So I just want to make sure everybody got that updated staff report. The issue was there was some formatting that made all of 2021 look like a link. And it was not a link, so we corrected that and took the highlight or the blue underlining out of that. But that happened, and then we also sent the entire PowerPoint out. So hopefully everybody got that as well. And then at your seat, you have a diagram that has blue circles on it. I'm going to refer to that. It's one of the places that I get the most questions, and there's some misunderstanding about the organization, so I wanted to make sure that you had all of the information. My goal tonight, I know everybody has a little bit of information about this topic, and some people have information from when it started, and some people have information from yesterday. So my goal tonight is going to be to knit all of that information together and make sure that we all have the same foundational knowledge about where we're at with after-school care, out-of-school buildings. So I'm going to use the clicker and make sure that I can do that. Okay, so for tonight's presentation, I'm going to talk about organizational relationships, and then I'm going to go through the history and background, and then I will hand it over to Campfire Columbia, and Josh Todd, who you just met, is the CEO and president of Campfire Columbia, will give an overview of Campfire. So, organizational relationships, it's kind of word soup when you start dealing with some of the history of after-school programming. There's a lot of different acronyms and a lot of different organizations with very similar names. So I'm going to try and make sense of those using the diagram that's at your place. So starting with the Mayor's Ball. That is a 501c3 fundraiser. It has not been operational since 2017, but if you noticed in the staff report on the last page, one of you asked how much money that fundraiser brought in over the years, and so we included that information. The Mayor's Ball would give the money that they raised to another organization called KOB Inc. KOB Inc. is another 501c3. Their sole purpose is to distribute the mayor's ball funds. And right now there's about $250,000 left in the KOB Inc. funds. Right now, KOB Inc. grants that money directly to Campfire Columbia. Historically, it granted that money to the city of McMinnville. And then the other part of the diagram includes Campfire Columbia, the city of McMinnville, and the school district. So you all know the school district provides the space and the busing and the janitorial for after-school programs. The city of McMinnville used to run the actual program out of school buildings, and now we have an intergovernmental agreement with the school district where we basically rent or lease the space, and then we contract with Campfire Columbia to provide the service. We do that contract out of 5 schools, which was part of a finding out of the assessment was Washer is within the city limits of Lafayette, and so because of that, we started a conversation with the city of Lafayette to let them know the role that the city of McMinnville had previously provided. Early in KOB, the city of Lafayette actually was not a part of the program that the city of McMinnville ran. At some point in time, it kind of got absorbed in with the other 5 schools, and now we're suggesting that's not the role of the city of McMinnville to administer a program out of a school outside the city limits. So let's dig in a little bit to KOB Inc. I want to be really clear about this because I think some people think the city of McMinnville has the money. We do not. KOB Inc., the 501c3, is the body that distributes the money from the mayor's ball. As I mentioned, about $250,000 remain in that fund, and the board is a very dedicated board. They are getting smaller every year because they are on a spend down of that money, and they have no desire to do fundraising. They were simply the arm that distributed the money. So to be clear, on that board, there are 2 community volunteers, a McMinnville School District principal, and me. And we receive the proposals for granting, and that board decides how much to give, when to give it. There have been some challenges recently. For example, now that we're in the spend down mode, there was a bond that needed to be cashed in order to get the money to Campfire as quickly as we could. So some of those things are taking some administrative time as we wind down that dollar amount. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions about the sort of organizations and KOB Inc.
Thank you, and I'll just look around the room if anybody has anything with clarity on at this time. Okay, I think we're good to move.
How large was the board originally? You said it's starting to dwindle. What was the original board number?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I think I've been here since 2017, and it's been 4 since then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, KOB, what? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Originally, there were director of curriculum, Courtney served for a while. There were several principals, Dr. Russell, and then other community volunteers were initially part of that board. Kathy Cabe was on the board for a while. She's a former city councilor. So it was probably at least double the size as it is now.
Thank you.
All right, continuing on. KOB, the Kids on the Block program, was a part of the city. It was housed within the Parks and Recreation Department, so it was a program that we ran just like rec sports, just like we managed the aquatic center. KOB provided the service of after-school care out of the school buildings. It ran for decades. It was a really important part of our community, and it was a partnership between the school district and the city. KOB Inc., again, is a 501c3. They have the funding for KOB and Campfire. That's their sole purpose. They have 4 members, $250,000 left. So there's a difference. It matters whether or not you put Inc. on the end of what you're talking about. So history and background, how we got here. I included a very detailed timeline in your packets, and I also thought I would pull some of the messaging that we have been using in the city budget over the years. Sometimes I hear that this is a recent problem, that it's something that's cropped up recently, that there's been something really quickly happening that has all of a sudden made some turmoil in the program, and I want to just emphasize that the city has been identifying this for a long time. In 2008, we had waiting lists. We put in our budget document that waiting lists for KOB are the norm. We knew that. It continued through until the very last year KOB operated. In 2014, we identified that long-term financial sustainability was the greatest challenge for KOB. Then 2 years later, we analyzed the KOB Inc. money, and based on what KOB had been pulling from that, we estimated that that money would last for 7 years. We knew the problem was coming. We knew it was coming. It was part of the conversation from the very beginning. And then in 2017, we got a little bit more engaged in trying to solve the problem. And from that, we decided to bring in an outside evaluation team to look at the entire program and provide us with some sustainability recommendations. We knew that there were organizations out there that managed, met, trained for, lobbied for after-school programs, and so we issued an RFP. So in 2018, we, together with the McMinnville School District staff, looked at the after-school program assessment RFP. Issued that to, we have to post that on 6 different web pages and post it on the city's web page as well. At that time, we got, I think, 3 proposals back of interested providers, and we evaluated those with a member of KOB Inc., one of the board members, McMinnville School District staff, and the city represented that group. We scored them all, and Oregon Ask was the selected consultant. So then we started kicking off the process. McMinnville School District staff was evaluated as one of the focus group, or interviewed as one of the focus groups to kick that off. And at the same time, we knew these problems were occurring within the KOB program. We were really struggling to find enough staff for fall. We already cut the enrollment capacity at that point for what we anticipated being able to serve. And then, so that's going on at the same time this assessment is going on, and then we had a larger meeting that included the elected officials from the city council, more McMinnville School District staff, and Oregon Ask to talk about the big picture of what we were trying to accomplish with the assessment. We also took a tour of all of the sites with the superintendent at the time. And again, we knew we had real trouble filling all of our staff slots. So we had 115 kids on the waiting list in fall of 2018. And we were doing everything we could to get staff hired at the time, and some of you may know that Linfield did federal work study with KOB for a very long time. Eventually, the work study program was limited to on-campus, and KOB remained the only off-campus option for work study. However, the schedule at Linfield also changed around the same time and made it more difficult for us to schedule staff that were students at Linfield, depending on their schedule. So the federal work study participation started to dwindle, but yet we knew we had more kids than we could accommodate. And then, pretty urgently, we found out as the Oregon Ask consulting team was going through the practices in KOB that we were actually in violation of a bully rule requiring a certain number of breaks for our staff. Obviously, we addressed that as quickly as we could, but it just compounded the problems we were having at the time of not having enough staff. We were having to double up staff and backfill staff so that we could manage within the bully requirements. So we didn't wait till the end of the assessment to address that. So Oregon Ask, did you?
Yes, when KOB was still running the program, would you say that it was a very affordable program for families? And do you know what the level of support was coming from KOB Inc.?
Mm-hmm. I usually say there were two reactions to the KOB fee. One was, oh my gosh, that is dirt cheap. Yeah, I will pay that today so that I can have a slot. I may not need to use it every day, but that is the best deal I've ever seen in childcare. I will pay it. To, there's no way I can afford that. I can't even get the help. Even if we got the scholarshiping from the city, it was too much for some people to pay anything for childcare. Your other question?
We have the data for a current number of a percentage of families who are receiving scholarships or some kind of support. Do you have any rough guess of?
Yes. So I think in 2013, and this is going to be on a slide coming up, I think it was 63%. We'll check my numbers when the slide comes up. By the time 2018 rolled around, I think it was less than 30% were receiving aid. So I will get to that part. Okay.
Before you move forward,
Yes.
if I may, back in the day of KOB, when we were struggling to find staff, that staff was all being paid for by KOB Inc., or were we subsidizing it as a city, and how much, if we were subsidizing, were we subsidizing it as a city?
We were subsidizing. It depends on how you calculate the overhead costs of the city, but at a minimum, $40,000 every year. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question? So in the assessment findings, it says staff have little experience training or resources to accommodate children with special needs. I have a question about how that would translate if that level of staff were trying to provide services to today's kids, post-COVID kids, if that would work.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we sort of changed the model, is because it wasn't working at the time, and my guess is it would only be compounded now.
So in terms of considering like the affordability piece, financially, the training and like the qualification piece is critical to ensuring that the staff is trained to work with all populations.
Correct. And one of the things in the Oregon Ask assessment you might see is on a lot of the recommendations on the far right side of the table, they included dollar amounts, or I should say ranges, based on just this one's low-hanging fruit, doesn't have a huge cost, to this one's going to be a higher cost. And we evaluated that. What can we move forward on? What do we have the resources to improve? But yes, we knew that there was going to be a lot of investment in order to get where we thought the program needed to be.
I might add a finer point to your question. So our Linfield students were not trained. Currently, we're working with Campfire. Could you speak to the level of training that Campfire provides to kind of more get to the point of what it looks like currently in after-school care?
Yeah. We're a licensed childcare provider with the state of Oregon, so everyone has to first meet state standards before they can even work in childcare, which in our first year was a little bit of a challenge because there wasn't a large pool of workers who had experience working in after school. We also provide significant training, so we are required under state requirements to do 15 hours per school year per staff. We actually do monthly trainings for all of our staff, both site-based and district-based, so specific to issues that are coming up in McMinnville. And then on top of that, we do at the beginning of programs, so going into this summer, they're in training this week, they're in training for the full week in McMinnville, and then coming into the fall, they'll go through 2 weeks of full training. So we're kind of doing consistent training both to maintain our licensure, but also for our staff to maintain their CBRs and their ORO, which is the state licensing kind of body for childcare workers. They have to submit and upload their training documents to the state to be able to keep their ability to work in a licensed program.
And I sort of have a sub question that only because it mentions the positive behavior intervention and support. Is KOB staff trained or required to work within a student's 504 or IEP or positive behavior support plan?
Campfire?
Sorry, excuse me. Yes, thank you for correcting me. Campfire, yes.
We work as much as we can with families. We also have to be really clear on our limitations. So you're like right on the point. Post-pandemic, our staff are reporting that behaviors for all kinds of emotional dysregulation have increased. The job of providing childcare is harder today than it was before the pandemic. We have a lot of coordination at the school building level to try and work with kids who are on IEPs or 501 or 504 plans. We do not have the ability as a child care provider to support kids who need one-on-one support. So if in the school day they have either an outside provider or a state staff person that comes with them as a support, that usually doesn't continue into after school. And because of the ratios we have to maintain, we're not able to have one staff person dedicated to one child. And we have those conversations with families during enrollment. When they share with us what their needs are, we can be clear with them on here's what we can provide. One-on-one direct support is not something that our program is set to provide.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Oregon Ask and their assessment. I think of Oregon Ask sort of like the League of Oregon City is to the city, or perhaps the Oregon School Board Association might be, but they are a statewide resource for after-school programs, and they support, train, do a lot of different things for after-school programs, and they have a set of quality standards, competencies, and outcomes for after-school programs, and that's what they applied to KOB to see how we were doing. We thought we were going into it to solve a financial problem. And when we got into the quality assessment, we found some other things that needed to be addressed. You mentioned the one about the accommodations. Feedback was not something that we incorporated into our programs regularly. We did not involve families in the programming. And this is to answer your question about, it appears that over the years, we shifted who we were trying to serve. So that's the number. Those are the numbers I was trying to remember. 63% of families were in need of scholarshiping in 2013 and 27% 5 years later. So we had reduced the amount of families that were needing financial aid in the program. And then another thing that is really fundamental, because we sort of mirrored the Linfield schedule and even the city schedule, we were not operating on every day of the school year, and we also could not do that with the Linfield students because they had breaks at the same times. So we were only operating 78% of the school days, which is one of the recommendations that Oregon asked. We needed to, in order for it to be dependable child care for working families, it needed to run more days than just 78% of school days. Josh mentioned something that I want to hit upon. Campfire Columbia is required to get state licensing. KOB and city after-school programs are exempt. So the standards that he was referencing and what they have to comply with in order to get that licensing, we did not have to do that. That's not to say we didn't try and follow best management practices, but you can see from this example, the Oregon Ask staff visited a couple of sites and found it all the way from 1 to 10 staff to student ratio to 1 to 30. And state licensing requires 1 to 15. So then we also go into the PBIS issue and whether or not the city staff was practicing that. There were few written policies and procedures and no staff handbook and no real staff appraisals. Probably the one that hit us the most in the gut as being the agency that provided the care was 10% of students surveyed said they did not feel safe at KOB. That one stung. And probably at the council meeting, I think the soundbite that the consultant landed on when Oregon Ask was presenting is some are being left behind with the program known as KOB. Okay, so once we had the assessment with a lot of recommendations in there, we knew that we needed to prioritize. How were we going to pay for some of these upgrades? How were we going to meet some of the demands that we knew we needed to meet as a provider that were laid out in the Oregon Ask assessment? So we wanted to get an advisory committee together, and we formed a group called the KOB TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee. That committee included 2 city councilors, city staff, KOB original founder, community advocates, 1 MSD principal. The Linfield University Education Department was represented. We had parents of KOB kids that were enrolled in the program, and then KOB Inc. was a part of the KOB TAC as well. That group was tasked with using that independent assessment that we had just completed with Oregon Ask, advise the city about next steps for KOB. We wanted to make sure that the community voice was also in there, and that's why we had such a diverse technical advisory committee. So the Technical Advisory Committee met March to July. They met 5 times, and in August, the Technical Advisory Committee recommendations were presented to City Council. And in there, we had developed a short and long-term plan with the assistance of the community representatives on there. The TAC short-term priorities were to improve communication through, we weren't translating everything that we needed to translate, and we also were not, as I mentioned, broadly communicating with all of the families that were participating in KOB. They also noted that we needed to increase fees, something that we had struggled with over the years, and we needed to solidify the scholarship program, and as I mentioned, have conversations about washer and how that was going to roll out. Again, increase the days KOB is offered in order to be a true child care for working families, including families in more of the conversations about planning, and then also that group really wanted us to focus on the most vulnerable in our community. So those were the short-term items, and then the long-term suggestion that that group put forward was in close partnership with the school district, explore the additional options and service providers who may enhance McMinnville's after-school service. And I think we're all on the same page that that's the goal that we're trying to do, is enhance the after-school and programs and the accessibility to them for families in McMinnville. So they noted, that committee, the Technical Advisory Committee noted this could be issuing a request for information or proposals for after-school services, and that happened in August of 2019. So in 2020, we just talked about this, the pandemic hit, everything paused. We started working on all different kinds of things related to childcare and stopped the work that the KOB TAC had recommended. Once we all sort of got back on the right path after the pandemic, jointly the school district and the city crafted language to find a provider that could offer an enriching, enjoyable after-school program. We were looking for academic instruction, homework, extracurricular activities, music, arts, recreation, just all of those things that we know are a quality after-school program. And then we also decided to go the extra mile here and say, not only that, we wanted an ability for the provider to offer employment-related daycare. That's a federal subsidy. That is a program that the city of McMinnville is not be able to provide. It requires an administrative overhead that we don't have in place, that we would not be able to get up and running. So we were hoping that we could find somebody that would bring that subsidy to the table. As I mentioned, we wanted somebody that had experience with state licensing, already had the parent and staff handbooks in place, somebody that communicated with families, including marketing. DEI needed to be incorporated into the programs. Staff training, we wanted to make sure that this was a quality program, and we also wanted to make sure that they were willing to do a sliding scale of fees and scholarship. And of course, what we've talked about a little bit is make sure that they had a program to ensure that there would be appropriate accommodations for kids with disabilities. So we were kind of shooting for the moon at that point, and what we ended up doing was drafting from that. We drafted a request for proposal, including editing by the school district, and we were thrilled to have their voice as part of that. And then we posted the RFP, a technical term for trying to find somebody to come in and provide that service. At the same time, we also began crafting an intergovernmental agreement. And this was, the thinking behind this was we wanted to provide some continuity. So we realized that stopping the system of the city running KOB out of school buildings was going to be a big change for everybody. We didn't want anybody to, any of the partners we were working with, to feel like we were just walking away. So we offered, out of the spirit of continuity there in partnership, to give a 3-year runway where the city would actually administer the contract with the provider. That is not in my experience in talking with providers in schools, that is not traditional to have an in-between, like a leasing agent, to do that. It's more of a direct relationship between the actual school and the provider. But we did that, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was clear that we were going to provide that administrative oversight for 3 years. And that is where the conversation started for you all at your last meeting. So the city awarded the contract to Campfire Columbia after a competitive process, and they were operating out of 5 schools, and Washer was a direct relationship that the city of McMinnville was not included in to provide those services. So hopefully those of you who have been involved in the details got something new out of that, I hope. And for those of you that hadn't quite knit all of the information together, hopefully that solves some of those gaps. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we'd asked for questions ahead of time so that if we needed to prepare, we could, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll start. You mentioned students being left behind, children being left behind, and you mentioned it in the context of KOB, that KOB was leaving students behind. But then also one of the bullet points is that, you know, our need has gone down, but that's not to say that the need in the community has gone down, but the need for scholarshiping has gone down because we're serving a less disadvantaged population. Is that a correct interpretation of that? And then, so will you kind of speak to the broader idea of how are we not leaving children behind? How do we not leave children behind?
Sure, and let me make sure I understand the first part of that question. You're referring to the data point in the slide that referred to 2 KOB dates.
Yeah, 63% down to 27%. I read it a couple times, and that's why I'm asking for clarity. I want to make sure
Yeah, there it is. So we believe, so both of those numbers were data from when the city ran KOB. Those do not include any of the numbers from Campfire Columbia. That's strictly KOB. We believe because let me see. We believe that to register for the program, you either had to come into the community center, you had to get on the phone. We knew it was not the easiest program to register for. And one of our conclusions was because there were more barriers to registration, it also made another barrier to people who don't have the time and the resources to stand in line outside the community center, which is what would happen. Those people that knew how it worked, those people that could get in the queue, those people that had the checkbook to write the money could get in line and stand at the steps of the community center and get in the door. We think those kinds of transactions were happening more and more between 2013 as we got to 2018. So I think there was still a need. I think that the focus of KOB had changed and shifted, that we made it easier for people who had the resources to register and more difficult for the people that didn't have the resources to register. That's one of the conclusions that we have drawn.
Okay, and going forward, just kind of with that, or at least for me, goal would be, you know, that we're not leaving children behind. And so maybe when you move into your part of the presentation, if you just think about addressing that. And then other questions, I'll look to my left first, kind of go around. Please, Mr. Vollmer.
Why did the fundraising or the mayor's ball, why was that discontinued?
That was discontinued, and I think you can see attachment D in the staff report shows the fluctuation of the different years of fundraising, and you can see it was really starting to decline. I think we had a very, very successful mayor over many, many years that brought in a lot of revenue, and that changed sometime around 2013, and we were not bringing in the same amount of dollars. And so, as far as I know, it was the mayor's choice not to continue on with the fundraising. Again, that was a separate 501c3, that was not the city.
Yeah, I think perhaps Councilor Menke, she was also on council at that time. I just joined council. Adam may remember, it's his incredible memory, and attended all council meetings. It was kind of an odd, I think it's one of the weirdest meetings I've ever been in, to be honest. Everybody was kind of heading in one direction, and the mayor at the time pretty much said, no, on the dais, we're not going in this direction. That's my recollection. Is yours similar?
Mine would be similar. Mayor had tremendous resources outside of the city that he brought in for the fundraising, and he was able to really leverage that and do a great job. These were not resources that Mayor Rick had or any of the mayors subsequent, at least to this point.
But there was a brief time when Mayor Rick and his wife did host the mayor's ball. There
were two, but they were not bringing in the funding that anything close to the funding that Ed could bring in.
Right. Yeah, And I do know too that at the district level, because I was involved at that time there, that staffing was also, and committee people and time away from buildings, and that was also starting to be more of a drain, if you will, on resources.
Yes, I believe in resources of city time, at least what I had heard at the time was somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and that was just becoming impractical with the city's financial issues.
And I think that's how much the event netted the last year. So it was no longer my interpretation of the data we've seen and my memory is that the event was basically no longer paying for itself. Mm-hmm. Adam, were you going to add something? Council President, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so, I mean, definitely the data showed that it was dwindling down to nothing or a net neutral return. But like Councilor Minke spoke to was, its most successful years were really tied to Mayor Gormley's ability to bring in some of his plumbing union contracts and leverage them for donations and bring in special guests at the state level that people wanted to pay to see and mingle with. So when you removed those plumbing connections from the mayor's ball, and then you add in its amount of runtime with the same volunteer core group, as you see with many things in this community that have dwindled over the last 30 years, i.e. Turkey Rama, the Wine and Food Classic, and other things like that. If there's not a group that steps up to run it, they kind of dwindle out, and the JCs were a very successful organization that put on a wide variety of things, including the city fireworks, and those don't happen anymore either. And so I think it's just acknowledging that times change and that the mayor's ball was no longer sustainable as a funding mechanism, and KOB was no longer sustainable as a child after school program, because our child care needs changed so much from when I was a bulldog at Memorial to what my son experiences there, Councilor Geary's son experiences at Memorial today. Schools changed, fundraising's changed, and we can't rely on a charity event to fund an after-school program.
And looking to my right, are there questions on this side of the table?
If I could just say, Director Muir, thank you for all the time and work you put into this packet ahead of time. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
What's the vacancy rate right now with the 1 to 15? It looks like maybe there's some openings at each of the sites.
Oh, that is a staff to student ratio that was observed during the assessment, but I think Josh will cover that when he gives his part of this presentation.
Perfect, thank you.
So introducing Campfire Columbia.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me here. Thank you for the joint session. It's great to see a city working together with its school district in such a collaborative way. My name is Joshua Todd. I am the president and CEO of Campfire Columbia. Campfire Columbia has been serving Oregon for 110 years. We have 20 years experience in the licensed childcare arena. And our vision is that we all are valued, belong, and thrive so that we can find and nurture our spark. Spark is something that we talk about a lot, and it's the basis of our programming. Every Campfire program will look different based on the kids and the staff in front of them, because what we want is to find that thing that lights a kid up, that gets them excited and makes them want to stay connected to school, to their friends, to themselves. And so we build programming around the kids in program. You're going to see a little bit of that ahead of time, but later on. So what makes us unique as a provider? These are four that I just wanted to highlight so that we all kind of have a shared understanding of Campfire Columbia and how it is different than previous programs in McMinnville. We really center our programming around youth voice, youth choice, developmental relationships, and shared leadership. Where's the best place to click? There we go. So first off, we honor the power of young people. Campfire programming, like I was saying, is really both for but also created by young people. Youth are engaged in really having decision-making power within the program because we know that it gives them more buy-in. It allows them to get excited. It actually helps with behavior issues. And so our programming really incorporates the voice of young people from the beginning. We also create opportunity for choice. And so we're providing meaningful opportunities for young people to determine what their day looks like. Will we have recess before academic time before recess? We run clubs, which are those programs that are specific to kids' interests, and they get to determine what those clubs will be. And as they get older, they actually get to lead some of those clubs. And the choices can be big to small, but we believe that that is a key component of a high-quality program. We're not just providing childcare, we're providing youth development opportunities. So young people are learning the skills they need to be active, engaged citizens when they're adults. So what does that look like in program? Program expectations and culture. Every site at the beginning of every quarter will talk about what their expectations are for each other. They'll come up with their rules for their community. And they have a daily community meeting. We want to reinforce that we're not just here showing up at a room together, but we're a community. We have a responsibility to each other. So that's part of how we ensure choice. Like I said, they get to determine how they spend their free time. They can determine the activities that they engage in, and they can create goals and plans for individual projects. We also center on an evidence-based curriculum and kind of framework called the Developmental Relationships Framework. This is kind of the foundation of how our staff are trained. We believe, and research has shown, that when you focus on relationships and provide key kind of building blocks for kids, that you see increases not only in their own self-efficacy, self-worth, but their academic skills, their ability to regulate, and those are here. It's important to express care. Kids need to feel seen, they need to feel valued. You need to be able to know their name and know their likes and their dislikes, and that's what our staff are trained to do. We want to challenge growth. It's always challenged by choice, but we're going to ask kids to try new things. And that can be as simple as snack, all the way up to activities that they may not be interested in, but we'll challenge them to kind of try something new. Providing support, making sure that they have the skills, the training, the people around them who can kind of hold their hand and say, you're doing a great job, try this now. Okay, now this next step. And then sharing power, that is at the kind of foundation of Campfire, so that youth choice is a way of sharing power. You don't walk into a Campfire room and are told, here's what you have to do. Those decisions are made with the young people, so that when somebody isn't following the rules, everybody is saying, hey, this is what we all agree to, this is what we're doing. Sharing that power allows for them to take ownership of the space instead of just being told, you have to do this now because this is what we do. And then expanding possibilities is the last part of the developmental relationships framework, and that's really just helping kids see all the opportunities that are available to them, and then working to make those available. Finally, shared leadership. This is, again, where we allow young people to lead in the space. And so we're looking for opportunities for all young people to have leadership that may look like, a first grader showing a kinder what program is like and what a day looks like because they've been here for a year before the kindergartner has. All the way up to fifth graders being able to conceptualize, curriculum plan, and lead a program. So we'll have fifth graders that have led fashion design club where they teach kids how to design t-shirts, and then they get to lead with a staff person. And that is one of those additional ways of kind of layering into a kid's experience, because we generally find that by fourth or fifth grade, most kids are too cool for after school. They don't want to be there, and so making them leaders of the group is the immediate way to keep them engaged. This is the ladder, just kind of shows you what the different levels of progressive leadership can look like. So leadership can be as simple as distributing handouts, keeping time for the group, all the way up to leading a group or starting their own advisory group for our programming, helping think through how could Campfire be better at your school, bringing your parents to a family night to show them what you're working on. So this is a rollout of Campfire here in McMinnville. In September, we opened in 2021, September of 2021, at Buell and Grand Haven. We then expanded into Newby in November of 2021. And then in 2022, we opened at Willamette in January, Memorial in March, and then our final site opened at Washer in December of 2022. So we have kind of 1.5 full school years in the McMinnville School District in all 6 schools. This is just going to be a summary, the next slides, of kind of where we've been and how program has grown over the last 3 years. When we started in the 21-22 school year, we had 62 kids across 5 schools. 47% of those were receiving Campfire scholarships, and then 15%, about 9 students were being supported by employment-related daycare. Employment-related daycare is an incredibly onerous but highly beneficial program for families. It's a significant subsidy. It is limited by the federal government and by the state of Oregon to the lowest income families, and so it is means tested. Campfire scholarships are not means tested. We don't require families to provide their taxes and bills, and it's if you have a need, you share with us what your need is. But for ERDC, we have to follow the guidelines of the state and federal program, and so that is for the lowest income caregivers who are working or going to school, and every adult in their household has to be working or going to school, which can sometimes create a barrier. In total, the first year, 61% of families were receiving some form of payment support, and in that year, it was a little over $52,000 that was going out. In summer of 2022, as a 501c3 nonprofit, we are able to apply for grants. We received support through the state of Oregon to provide free summer day camp programming in the summer of 22 to 65 students, and that was completely free. So 100% scholarship for 65 kids. And day camp ran for 6 weeks from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. all summer during those 6 weeks. So that was $156,000 in support that Campfire brought to McMinnville. And then 22-23 school year, we were serving 156 students across 6 sites, so you can see the growth there. 41% were receiving Campfire scholarships, 16% were receiving employment-related daycare. In total, 57% were receiving some type of payment support. And that totaled a little over $138,000 that year. ERDC, as I was saying, is an onerous program for families to sign up for. We have full-time bilingual staff who are able to kind of support families and get them through the process. The numbers for ERDC grew slowly over time, mostly because in this year, ERDC went into a wait list. So the state had increased funding for ERDC during the pandemic. They saw huge increases, which was great, but then realized that the state wouldn't have enough money to fund the program, and so they put a wait list, and so it was harder to get families into that program. And then the current school year, there we go. This current school year, we're serving 177 youth across 6 sites. 18% are receiving Campfire scholarships. 25% are receiving ERDC, so that ERDC number has increased. And 43% overall have received some form of payment support. The total support this school year has been over $208,000. And this for the current year, you can see is by school. So Memorial, even at our kind of lowest scholarshiped school, still 22% of families are receiving some form of scholarship. And Buell is our highest scholarship site with 55% of families receiving some form of scholarship. And to point out, when we talk about the significant benefit that employment-related daycare is, when you look at those numbers, if they're receiving a Campfire scholarship, the average monthly payment is about $143 a month. If they're receiving employment-related daycare, families are paying on average $4 a month. This is, I think, a good place to talk a little bit about kind of how we address kind of leaving kids behind. Unfortunately, there's probably some bad news. I think no provider will ever be able to provide the after-school experience for every student who needs it without significant investment from the state or federal government. We saw those investments during the pandemic, and we were able to provide free care, more care to families who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford it. And those have gone away, and we no longer have those supports. We do our best to try and ensure that the folks that are accessing program are a mix of those families who can afford it and can help fund others, and those families who need it most. And so for us, that starts with a collective care application. That's what we call our scholarshiping. But it's actually an application that everybody fills out. We don't ask families to come and beg or tell us that, I'm really in need, I need this. It's something that everyone does as part of their registration. And what we do is we try and educate families. This is what the average family in McMinnville makes. This is what childcare costs. Please reflect on your ability to pay for childcare and tell us what can you do. If you can afford more than what tuition is, we will, as a nonprofit, convert that into a donation, and we'll give you a tax receipt, and you'll know that your money that you're donating goes directly back to another family in McMinnville. If you can afford less, let us know, and reflect on the fact that whatever you ask for will reduce the amount of money that's available for other families. But we trust families, and we do not require them to provide financial information. We don't make it an onerous process. We want it to be the least kind of stigmatizing process for families. And then from there, most programs, and actually our program up until about 4 years ago, operate on first come, first serve. And so registration opens, and in some of our districts, schools would fill up and be full in 10 minutes. And that was the reality. We changed our registration process to align with the state's goals, educational goals. And so we have a lottery in place that families go through one time. When they're a new family to Campfire, they apply. There's a 2-week window to join the lottery. And then the lottery is run, and we ensure that the families who are getting placement are the families who need services the most. So we are prioritizing and aligning with the state goals. So we're prioritizing low-income students. We're prioritizing BIPOC students, students who come from single-parent households, and students whose caregivers have disabilities. And so those are our priority populations. That doesn't necessarily always mean that everybody at a school will be in those populations. It also doesn't mean that everybody that is in that population that applies gets a spot, because we still are limited based on licensing. Our licenser would come into this room and they would measure it, and they would tell us exactly how many kids we could have in this room. And if there's no other room available, that's the limit. So we really try and do our best to make sure that the folks who need it the most are able to access program, but that is never going to be the total number of students who need aftercare at a school, unfortunately. Just to
mind
summarize.
pausing? I saw a question coming up over here,
Sure.
and I got a note that perhaps I missed somebody on this side earlier. So, Mr. Benner, do you want to start?
Thank you. The lottery exists at other schools, but we have not instituted it here, correct?
No, we have instituted it in McMinnville. It only happens the first time a family applies. So once a family applies, they go through the lottery. Once they receive a spot with Campfire, we guarantee their placement in program until their child ages out. So as long as they keep signing up, their place is held first, and then new families who haven't applied will go through the lottery.
So are we turning anyone away right now?
So far in McMinnville, we have had some folks last year when we were struggling to staff that weren't able to make it into program because of staffing limitations, but the numbers for McMinnville so far have been low.
So what's our limiting factor right now is staffing, or is that, have we solved that?
No, it has mostly been staffing. We this year served 177. We had licensed capacity for 300. I would say ballpark, don't quote me that this is an exact figure, but at any point in time, we probably had somewhere between 10 and 25 families that wanted in program, and we weren't able to bring a staff person on in time.
Thank you.
Please.
When you say that there was 40 to 60% of families receiving scholarship, was that all of that scholarship coming from KOB Inc.?
It's a mixture of KOB Inc. dollars, donations from families, and then some but limited Campfire general funds.
Thank you. Counselor?
Yeah, I'm just, my idle curiosity, Susan, do you know the last year we did KOB, what was the enrollment?
The numbers, I believe, let's see, in 2018, we had 280 kids registered and an additional 115 on a waiting list.
So we have a pretty steep decrease in the total number that are asking at this point.
Yes, although things have changed significantly. So we actually are seeing decreased numbers in all the districts that we work in. So I can't speak to whether or not that is, some of it I'm sure is the cost. Campfire is, when you just look at our rate sheet, is more expensive than what people would have been used to with KOB Inc. And even though we try and work with people and let them know, like, you should apply for collective care, you should apply for ERDC, we can get you scholarships, sometimes the amount I think is scaring people away, so we don't even get to talk with them. But in general, all of our districts, more families are working from home, more families have found other ways of managing their childcare needs.
Thank you.
Point of clarity on that. What do you see as a decrease on other districts you have historical pre-pandemic numbers for?
So across all of our districts, pre-pandemic, which wouldn't have included McMinnville, in 2020 we were serving about 900 students for all of our districts. This past year we were serving about 800, but the year before that it was only about 650. And most of it is the increasing cost of everything. Families are having to make different choices about what they spend their money on. And so sometimes childcare is the first thing to go, and the other is that a lot of families have found alternative ways of managing childcare. So a parent or both parents are at some point working from home, and so they're able to manage childcare differently.
You have, this is more specific to the question that Councilor Garvin asked, what about like-sized districts to McMinnville? Because you said across all districts, and our district demographics would be different. And also, would you presume that because districts' enrollments overall across districts are also decreasing, that could also contribute to fewer families seeking to apply? So it's two questions, basically, and I don't expect you really off the top of your head, maybe just ballpark it, but I'm curious to know district demographics similar to ours, what your experience is with families seeking care in those size districts.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, we only work in 3 districts, so it's a very small number.
I didn't realize that, sorry.
Yeah, we're in Portland Public, Westland, Wilsonville, and McMinnville. So
more like Wesley and Wilsonville, we're nowhere near Portland Public size.
And I would add that even in the Parks and Recreation programs, we are still building back from the pandemic. So that's not unique to childcare. We are still recovering as well, and we don't know how close we'll get to pre-pandemic numbers, but we're still working on it.
And Counselor?
The limiting factor being staffing in our area, do you see that consistent with your other areas as well?
yeah, I would actually, McMinnville has been one, and the first year it was probably more challenging. I think because of our benefits and wages, we have had a little bit of an easier time recruiting in McMinnville than we do in Portland, where someone can go and honestly work at Target and make more money than they do in childcare. So it's been a little bit easier, but still we're dealing with, there's a kind of limited pool of folks to pull from. To work in after-school childcare, you have to have very specific experience working with kids aged 5 to 12. And so the number of folks that can kind of come in it's a smaller pool of people.
And then the ERDC wait list, that was sort of a statewide for you. Everybody's struggling with that.
Yeah. That was somewhat addressed in the short session. There was about $50 million that was allocated for the ERDC program. I don't know whether or not that will get us back to adding like a ton of new families, but we have been training up our registrars on some of the ways to get families in. So if a family is on TANF, they immediately qualify and they kind of skip the wait list. So we've been looking at some of those strategies and informing our principals in schools that, like, hey, if you know of families, this is a way to get them support.
But just confirming what I did hear you say is that you have full-time staff dedicated bilingually to help families navigate the ERDC process.
Yes.
Super. Thank you.
I have a simple question, yes. How do you advertise the program? Because it can be the case that someone family, they don't know about the program, and then details. Do you have an office staff to run it, to advertise, basically to promote the program?
So we have our staff that are based in McMinnville have space in the community center. We also have monthly meetings with, and those have been kind of recently established, but monthly meetings with the building principals and are sharing with them kind of what are our numbers, what spaces do we have. So if we have space available, they know, like, oh, I've got 5 slots. I know families who might need that. And then when our staff aren't in program, we've been encouraging them to go and put up flyers for day camp, put up flyers for registration. We also have hosted kind of special registration events in town. We're going to be at the Mac Fresco festival. So we are trying to get the word out there, and then we also offer our families discounts. If they recruit other families, they can get money off of their tuition.
Any additional questions at this time? Please.
So you talked about, I got to think how I want to word this now, because it just falls out of my head. Come back to it.
Okay, and was there one more over here, Council President?
Yeah, back in our work session in June of 22, there was talk about a district employee, Daniel, I don't remember his last name, was going to be doing outreach. And did that ever integrate with Campfire and help with scholarships and that?
I think that was David Cano. Is that correct? He came to some of the quarterly meetings that I held with some of the Campfire leadership and MSD leadership, but was not, I don't know how far that went into the school district in terms of getting the slots filled.
Okay. And then on the vacancy, or on the wait list that Campfire had this year, was that isolated to like one specific school? Like historically Memorial always ran a really long wait list, or was that like 2 slots per school of the 5 in the city of McMinnville, or?
It was mostly at Memorial and Newby.
Okay. And then you included Washer in some of your PowerPoint here. Did the city of Lafayette provide any direct help in that relationship with the MSD?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And Superintendent Brockett, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to speak on David Cano. One of the reasons we now have monthly meetings with principals is we didn't want David out recruiting families to daycare that didn't have slots. It sends a weird message. So now that David knows how many slots are available, when he is out in the community speaking with parents that are struggling, he's able to, with his knowledge, be able to share where there are slots available. And then as for Washer, we keep speaking of that. So I think it's important everybody knows. I'm looking at my phone because they just sent me the name of the company because I didn't remember it. We have started a new partnership out at Washer. So we are kind of in that in-between working with Campfire, but we have had it's the Northwest Christian Church, who is now coming into Washer and providing free after-school care, kind of not quite aligned to Campfire. It's not the exact same thing, but they are providing those services at Washer now, so we no longer have to use Campfire services to provide daycare out in Washer. So we did that in collaboration as we were working through this. The principal out there had used them prior in Newburgh, and they asked, so they went through all the licensing and got licensed to be able to do it at Washer. So Washer has a complete different program now that we're going to use with them in Lafayette.
And is that program fully licensed like Campfire, or is it an exempt organization like KOB was?
It's fully licensed in that they do provide the childcare. They had to go through their own licensing, and then we put them through the same. So anybody working for Campfire or for this organization goes through our HR department to make sure it clears our background checks and our licensing. But it runs a little bit different in that it's not funded at the same level because there's no fees being collected or any. They're doing it out of a volunteer type basis through their church organization and nonprofit. So there's no fees attached. So they don't have to go through quite the same level as someone collecting funds from the state to run their programs.
So its funding is 100% on the church. There's no funding provided by the state or MSD?
Correct. It's full nonprofit, and they do it through their church organization.
Ms. Anderson?
That's concerning, because I'm concerned about the equity of program across the district, because Washer is one of our schools in our district. So I think that could raise a concern on families. And then also a church organization running a after-school program. I don't know the vetting process that they went through, but
we went through the full vetting process and took it through our legal department to make sure they reviewed everything. They are used in other districts. They're used rapidly a lot in Newburgh. It's how they fund their after-school programs. So we went through the vetting through our legal department to make sure that they were covered and it was legal.
Hungerford's or Lisa Fraley at WESD, is that what you're referring to?
Yes. So we put it through them and they compared it. So then we also did that. And you have to remember that pulling funds from the district from KOB in McMinnville is not the same as Lafayette. And Lafayette didn't have a KOB to fall back on. And we have to be able to provide services in all schools. So that was one of our ways, knowing that KOB was there and we were finding ways to subsidize out in Lafayette. We didn't have those resources. So,
No,
but we did vet it and we did make sure.
Washer is part of our district, so you're absolutely right. We need to, but I'm getting to is the equity of programming. And so I think that we'll probably have another discussion about that with a board meeting or a work session.
Oh, we could do that.
Just for clarity, you said KOB, but I think you meant Campfire at Washer.
Sorry, Campfire. Too many times we're using KOB and Campfire. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Counselor? No? Nothing at this time? Please?
Back to my.
All right.
So you talked about when the program was under KOB, it was not, one of the things that came up in the assessment, not closely aligned with school year. So has that shift taken place with Campfire, that it more closely aligns with what the school year time off is for the kids?
Yeah, Campfire's schedule is expanded beyond what KOB was able to offer. So we offer full-day program during all in-service days. We also provide full-day program during spring break, winter break, and summer. And our hours are actually longer. I believe that KOB Inc. ended at 5 and we go until 6 p.m.
Great, and I know you have more in your presentation as well. Any additional questions at this time? Not seeing any. Please continue.
One of the other pieces I just wanted to point out, as a nonprofit provider in the childcare space, we also are able to actively fundraise and go after funding. I do think there is an urgency around meeting the need of McMinnville around serving more kids and having more families who have low income be able to access program. That really, without state or federal funding, requires us to try and find other funds through fundraising, donations, or grants. And we're really actively interested in bringing our development and fundraising capacity to that. Since we've started, just a summary, we've brought in about $267,000 in employment-related daycare to the McMinnville community and Lafayette. $156,000 in grant funding to support the district, and a new opportunity that will be rolling out this fall, which is a partnership between Campfire and another organization called Playworks Northwest that will actually have the same staff that are in the building after school able to come and support facilitated recess. And so being during the school day, helping teachers and other staff have additional hands on the playground and implementing kind of best practice interventions for conflict mediation and kind of engaged play for kids. So just one of those other pieces that comes with having a nonprofit provider. Quickly, benefits for families. We offer flexible packages, so families can choose anywhere from a 1-day-a-week package to a 5-day-a-week package. As I said, we also have full-day care for all in-service days, spring break, winter break, summer, and bilingual staff. And that's both not just from our registrars who help families sign up, but depending on the site, 40 to 60% of our staff are bilingual, bicultural, and our leadership of our department in McMinnville is bilingual, bicultural. For staff, the benefits, we start at $16.80 an hour, and those are mostly for our high school students. Those are for staff that have no experience working with kids and that we're kind of training up. Our program specialists who are able to be left alone with kids and who do some of the curriculum development, they start at $19.32 an hour. And our bilingual staff range from $17.80 to $20.32 an hour, and all of our staff receive 100% employer-paid health care and an automatic 3% retirement investment, as well as paid vacation and volunteer time. It's important for us that our staff give back to the communities that they serve, and so we actually pay them to go and volunteer in community for 24 hours, up to 24 hours a year. Benefits for students, this is one of those examples of clubs that are, built by the students and what their interests are. We had a young person at Grand Haven who was really interested in writing and was interested in what it meant to become a published author. And so the staff found a resource that allowed the kids to kind of create and write their own books. They were able to do all of the illustrations, and then we worked with an online provider that would take those drawings and those stories and turn them into actually published bound books, so the students could see themselves as published authors. And we made sure to purchase copies for the site, so kids whose families may not be able to afford would be able to get a book of their own, and they would be able to see their name on the book and see what it would be like if you grew up to become a published author. So that's just one example of what some of those clubs can look like. Additional resources, I'm not the only person who knows a lot about our programming in McMinnville. Adriel Person is our BAS director. She's also a single mom, and so I told her, it's 6 o'clock, I got you, you can stay home. And then this is our McMinnville registration email. And our multi-site manager for McMinnville, Arisbeth Martin-Boteja, is our leader out here. So these are the folks that you would talk with in McMinnville. And that's it.
Thank you so much. All right, well, let's reopen this to more conversation and more questions. I'm going to just start over here. Mr. Benner, maybe we'll just go around and give everybody an opportunity to get anything off their, out of their minds, and we don't have to, you're not required to ask a question or make a comment at this time, but just think of this as a way to kind of get the conversation rolling around the table.
Thank you, Mayor. What is the next step now? I think that we've got a room full of people that are finally up to half of what Susan has been through in the last several years. What's the next step, and how do we transition from this sort of in-between zone to a permanent long-term?
So from an administrative perspective, we had a 3-year intergovernmental agreement, and we have since extended that for 1 year for the city to remain the contract administrator. Through that, we also are extending the contract to Campfire for the 5 McMinnville schools. That's the current status of our administration.
Do you have any follow-up? Or I think, if I may, I think that's kind of part of the point of this meeting, that perhaps that can't be answered at that table, but that needs to be answered through conversation around these tables. Counselor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little concerned about the numbers. When we were doing 280 plus 115 on a waiting list, that's 395 families that were looking for care. Right now we're at 177 plus 25 on a waiting list. That's 202 families looking for care. That's almost half. That's a steep drop. And I'm concerned as to why that would be, and would love some deeper dive into why that's happening beyond just COVID. Because that's concerning to me. That speaks to me more than just dollars and cents. There's something else going on, particularly when you have a lot more effort going into the community to try to get people to sign up for your program than we had for Kids on the Block. So that's concerning to me. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know that that's relative to this conversation, but I just want to say that. And yeah, I'm interested to see what the direction going forward is going to look like with how we're going to spend down this money and what happens with that transition. So thank you very much for the presentations on both of your parts. You guys did an excellent job.
Thank you, Counselor. Can you speak a little bit to the cost? Because I think, you know, the kind of elephant in the room is to have a licensed quality program, it is far more expensive than what it cost families for KOB. And so we are working as an agency to try and find other dollars and ways of supporting. I don't have the exact number of KOB, but you know, if a family is in 5 days of programming with Campfire, even though it's more hours, it's $385 a month, which is, my understanding, much, much more than what it was with KOB.
Yeah, and I think we can dig into some more information on that. I think one, the student to staff ratio is different, which would account for more students being able to be in the classroom with less staff. That's one of the issues. The second was, I think just generally the transition from a heritage program like Kids on the Block, which everybody knew the name of it, everybody knew what building to go to. They didn't necessarily know it was the city running it, but they knew about KOB. The transition, not only with the cost piece of it, but just learning the different language to use was, I think, a stumbling block 3 years ago for a lot of people on all different sides of this. And so I think Campfire did their best to try and get up and running, and I'm eager to keep helping them on that path towards getting back to what the quality program that we need to have.
Thank you. Nothing for you? Counselor?
Thank you for the presentation and notes. I guess just a couple of thoughts and then some questions for the board. But yeah, nearly decade-old statistics of enrollment. I won't connect to the current provider's ability to deliver a superior product. I mean, Kids on the Block, having gone through this presentation, having gone through the TAC, no doubt in my mind was an antiquated, ill product that we were delivering to the city, and it was using unqualified people that didn't align with the school calendar and it was a model that served people who didn't need it. And that's a harsh way to criticize a program that was created around a need, delivered a product for kids like Adam and I for a long time, but needed to change and did. And Campfire was selected through a good process and provides an amazing, amazing product to the kids in the schools, employs people, actually treats them well and takes care of them and provides for them. And so to me, we're really lucky to have Campfire taking over for KOB and that filling that need. And I'm eager to hear what the plan is for going forward. We've got this extra year and hope that we can continue to provide a service, be it Campfire or others. I don't know of any others, but I can't imagine that anyone could do it better than Campfire. So just eager to hear what the school board's intention is, whether it be tonight or on their own process. But sort of what would be the goal of what the program is, if it's offered at all, and how can the city help, get the message out or work through any issues from our end. But yeah, thank you for the presentation tonight and your service that you guys are providing.
Thank you.
I want to echo the thank you to Susan and Todd. You did a great job, Susan. You did a really good job of putting into 20 minutes what happened over the last 25 years. So I appreciate the hard work you did on that. Campfire, I appreciate also because I have a much greater understanding now of the program and the type of program, and I very much appreciate that it's licensed and that you need to follow all of the state of Oregon laws requiring licensing, and that I think that's what we need for our students and the children in our community. I'm very interested in the equity work. I think that our programs district-wide need to be equitable, and so I'm hoping that there's a solution forward for all of our buildings. And I do believe strongly that the employers in our community are the city of McMinnville. It is the school district and that. And so whatever our path forward is, we need to make sure that we are collaborating, because these are our children. These are the children that leave school and they're going to come to work, or they're going to come and hang out downtown, and they're going to maybe come back to this community when they're adults, as it seems like these two gentlemen on either side of me have done. So I think it's important that we continue to make a good investment in our community. I did hear about some barriers for families, and I'm pleased to know that we're working on trying to find solution to those barriers. One of the things is that any program that's income dependent, some families are very reluctant to fill out paperwork. So how do we address a barrier like that moving forward? I definitely think that we are in need of making sure that we continue to provide quality programs for children after school, and I'm anxious to see how that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you to both you guys for a great presentation, and it's good to have a better understanding at Campfire. I've heard great things from fellow parents about our KOB graduates and the quality of organization that you guys provide in the schools. So I'm happy to see that from a programming standpoint, we've moved the needle on that for the children. And to me, that was the most important thing of the TAC that was put together with KOB back in 17 and 18. The elephant in the room is obviously cost. You could, sign up for KOB for about $600 for the year, but being a parent that had a kid in KOB, when spring break would come up, or Jan term would come up, or winter break would come up, it seemed like your kid was out of KOB as much as they were in KOB. Where with Campfire, it's predictable. You can know that your kid's in an environment that there is growth going on. They are gently challenged to make decisions, and they're empowered in that effort, instead of just being, not to knock on KOB, but basically just a place that you knew your kid wasn't at home playing with knives and matches. So I think that's important to recognize, that you guys are moving the needle from a programming standpoint. Where we go from here is definitely a concern of mine, and I do want to make sure that there is after-school care in this community for youth, especially at the elementary school age. I personally don't feel that that's in the purview of a city core service for a city of McMinnville policymaker. Can we, as the city of McMinnville and a policy group as city council, empower the school district and the school board and be a good partner? I would be interested in that, but asking city staff to administer a contract that has no direct relation with the kids to know how successful Campfire is being, I think, is just adding a layer of bureaucracy and cost that doesn't need to be there, when we could get more of those dollars direct back to the kids and hopefully lower the cost of that program, or keep the cost of that program more stable. The first couple years, doing the math off the slides, it was about $900 a student served is kind of how that scholarship money broke down. And then this last year, that jumped up to almost $1,200. It looked like that was mainly due to a higher percentage of the ERDC funds. But do you see those funds drying up? I know you mentioned the wait list, but is that kind of pie in the sky money, or is it something that you can depend on as a program that the state will always have some sort of ERDC money available?
Well, it's a federal allocation, and so it comes down from the feds. Once a family qualifies for ERDC, they do have to go through an annual recertification. If their income stays low, they will continue to receive that subsidy as long as their child is in care. And so we work with families to ensure that they don't fall into any of the bureaucratic potholes that get them kind of kicked off of the program. So we're making sure that their forms are up to date. We're making sure that they're submitting on time. Most of our families continue year after year to receive that subsidy. We have not, in the state of Oregon yet, while there was a wait list, we haven't seen anyone removed from the program.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly would just be, before we leave tonight, it would be nice if there was some sort of direction jointly as a body, as well as clarity on what the school district plans to do going forward. A lot of tonight was kind of just a revamp of what we met about 1 week shy of 2 years ago. So it doesn't seem in the last 2 years we've really moved the needle, other than let Campfire have some run time on what they can provide. And I think that, outside of enrollment numbers, your data supports, in my opinion, you continuing on. And but if the district chooses not to continue on, or they want to go out for an RFP just to keep everybody honest, it'd just be nice to know that as a parent in the district as well as a community member. Thank you.
I think that McMinnville School District would love to have free pre-K and would love to have kids in school until 6 o'clock and have summer school every summer. And we don't have the funds, we don't have the capacity to do that. And that is not in our expectations. We need to provide K through 12 education, and our staffing is already stretched very thin. You can see all of our negotiations of what teachers are saying. And so we need to focus on that K through 12 education, as much as I would love to be able to provide all of this extracurricular. And so you're saying it really isn't the city's job. We appreciate that you've done this for so many years and had this gentle handoff. And the actual funding and staffing cannot come from us. We see all that you have to go through for licensing and your struggles with staffing as well. So I know what that high standard is, and it sounds like you're delivering an excellent program. When I look around at other counties that have a Boys and Girls Club building or a YMCA, these 177 kids that are currently enrolled could be bused to one hub so that each school doesn't have to have that. In the next 2 years, we're not going to have any kind of facility like that. We don't have another option in McMinnville or even in Yamhill County for that. So I feel like we could do an RFP and see if there's another company. But like you said, the brand recognition, just getting the ball rolling, getting people comfortable with enrollment, it seems like Campfire would be the best solution to continue. And I hope that even with the city out, that KOB Inc., since that's separate, would still be able to do some funding. But it seems like whether it's grants or fundraising, it doesn't have to come from the school district. And even in our joint sessions, we've spent a lot of time on this, that it feels like it should be a community organization fundraising, or it should be on Campfire. We will support with the space that's available in our schools, but I'm not sure what else the school district is able to do.
Thank you, and we're going to go to this side and then wrap around.
I think Josh had a question or no?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to support what you're saying. I think childcare is not the core mission of our public school system. It should not be. You all have a very hard job around educating young people, and in almost all other districts, it's not a requirement that they are the childcare provider, that they have contracts and kind of have somebody manage it for them. I do want, because I didn't mention this in my presentation, and I want to say thank you to the district. The McMinnville School District has been one of the most supportive district partners that we have had, from during COVID, providing meals, providing busing, kids getting picked up from their school and driven home, as well as free space. In a lot of other districts, that isn't the case, and so I just wanted to say kudos to you all. I think you are doing a great job with the available resources you have, and it should not be your responsibility to do childcare.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Yes, really a quick comment. I work for nonprofit, and we receive federal grants, but one of the requirements we have to get a little percentage to say with the people or the family they are on the very low category. So if we don't do that, we don't get the grant. So the question is for you, how do you manage that? So you said you first come, first serve, and you have 115 kids on the waiting list. How do you manage that? Because you, in case you want to comply with the percentage to serve the population, right?
Yeah. So that's part of the reason why we put into place the kind of very specific equity-focused lottery. So when families are joining program, everyone in program has gone through the lottery. We're able to make intentional choices about the families who are given the few slots that we have, and sometimes those slots are limited by space, sometimes they're limited by staffing. But we're making decisions that are aligning with the state and the kind of state education plan, because then that allows us to be more competitive when we go for grants, and we can say that we're aligning with the state's goals. And so that's what the lottery is in place for, is to really ensure that it's not just the families who kind of can hop on a computer when registration opens and get in, but we have a way as an organization to make sure that we're mission aligned with the families that we're serving.
Thank you.
Councilor Peralta?
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the work that you put into the presentation, obviously the work for the students. It seems like there's about $250,000 left in the fund, and the spending this year was about $300,000 out of that fund. How do you plan to manage that this year, assuming everything goes forward the way that it is?
And putting my KOB Inc. hat on, the last time that we talked with Campfire, the suggestion was there is 1 year left with the current type of funding grants that they were receiving, in 2 years on their program that they had planned to go forward. So KOB Inc., the last we heard is we probably would be granting money for 2 years to Campfire. So there's 2 more years of funding at the current, or a little bit lower than the current level that KOB Inc. is planning on granting. And you can talk about the longer term.
So then you're going to amortize that out over the 2 years, the total amount? It seems like you're going to have less than you need if the need is comparable to what it was in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and typically either KOB or Campfire would make the request for how much money they were looking for that year. And so we rely on them to bring that forward. Being fully transparent, everybody knows how much money is left in that fund. And so I think Campfire is going to think about that as they fund their structure for their next ask.
Yeah, I wanted to point out the full amount that we've received over the 3 years from KOB Inc. has been about 300 and whatever the number is, complete number. We only received that second payment of the $200,000 in April of this year. So in the first 3 years, we had only actually requested $100,000 from KOB. The reason why the ask was larger this year is because of the kind of the ending of a lot of the COVID grants. When we have other dollars, we spend those dollars first. We don't kind of go to the KOB well immediately. And so that's the kind of larger request this year was because some of the ending of grants. It also was because of the issue with the ERDC funding. A lot of families were getting really nervous about getting kicked off. And had a lot of concerns about balances. So the way that ERDC, this is really in the weeds, but the way that ERDC works is that families are approved for a certain amount, and then they will, the payments come directly to us, but they will get a bill that will show this kind of increasing balance month to month that they're expected to pay us. We let them know we're not going to send you to collections. We're not coming after you if you can't pay that. But for a lot of families, the idea of having an outstanding bill was really concerning. And so we worked with KOB to have the money that came through be able to clear the accounts for those families so that they wouldn't be seeing those increasing balances. And that's where some of the extra money came from, is to help our lowest income families feel more secure that they weren't at risk or in trouble because they had a really high ERDC bill.
sorry, just going back through the packet, you have 250,000 in this fund that we have, and then the county gave additional monies that haven't been spent down yet?
Those are restricted to summer, so we have summer funding through the county, through federal ARPA dollars for this summer and next summer. And then the money that we received from KOB Inc. this year, since it didn't come until April, and many families were already set up with their collective care scholarships, will serve in this year, and we'll be spending that money next year during the school year.
So you may have intended to do this already. I'm not sure if we're at the end of the presentation or halfway through it, but if we're at the end of the presentation, can you just kind of give us a nickel tour of the next 3 to 4 years?
Well, there's a lot of questions about the next 3 to 4 years. I mean, we will be having support and funding for this summer and next summer. We are actually opening enrollment for next year right now. I wish I could have come with like, here's how many families are enrolled next year. We'll have those numbers in the next week or so. We're committed to serving McMinnville. We obviously don't have control over the contracting process. If there's a RFP, we would love to compete and come back and say we would love to serve McMinnville. We are committed to being here. I do think that there is something that all of you can do as elected officials. After the last meeting and the article that came out, we have received reach out from a lot of community members that are like, let's bring the mayor's ball back, or let's bring fundraising back. I think there is a bully pulpit for you all to talk about the importance of after school. McMinnville, one of the reasons we wanted to come here is because you are one of the only communities that I have heard of that community members were funding childcare. That doesn't happen other places, and that's really special. And I think there is an opportunity for us to say with urgency that this is a need and more kids should be served, and there aren't state, federal, school district, or city resources to do it. And so if we're going to do it, we need to do it as a community, and we're here to support that fundraising effort. But I think you all can be champions of that as well.
So I just want to say, as a newer person on the school board, and having not seen this information before, I really appreciate both presentations. I kind of always lean on the data, so I'm a data geek, want to see how all this plays out and what it looks like. I think, you know, the big question that I would have, one, I will say, obviously, childcare is an incredible burden to most of our families. I testified a couple of years ago at the state level as we were looking at this as an issue and how do we make it more affordable to families. You know, I certainly speak from a place of privilege, and I know that. And at one point in time in our working lives as two working parents, we paid hundreds of dollars more than our mortgage payment to have our kids in daycare. And we were very fortunate that we could do that, but boy, it strapped us tight for a long time. So, you know, making care, quality care with licensed professionals available for our families is critically important to our kids' success. All the data that we're seeing, and of course, data that's been shared with us through Stand for Children, data that we're seeing across the country, the key factors that are helping our kids be successful in school, and the states that are now performing above pre-pandemic levels as far as their testing are the ones that provide quality after-school care, who have care that also includes some type of tutoring and homework support for kids and summer school programs. And those are the places that we're seeing the data move in a positive way for our kids. So, you know, the question to me is, what can we do to help Camp Fire be more successful and to help our families have access to continued quality care for our kids so that they can be successful as we move forward and we can get our performance up to those pre-pandemic levels. And again, how are we making sure that our kids have access to these programs? I guess the question that I have when we talk about, you know, school district doesn't provide daycare, I get that. The question I have is, from a cost standpoint, as you explain this, I guess I'd want to see more in detail what that budget looks like, because the way you're describing it is the city of McMinnville isn't paying for this program, and the school district isn't paying for this program, with the exception of being able to provide space, which is critically important, an ease for parents to be able to get their kiddos there. So in my head, it seems like, one, certainly scholarship monies to help pay for fees for families, but there's an opportunity for fundraising. And as a nonprofit fundraiser for the last 23 years of my life, I think I agree with you. I think the call to our community may be, how do we step up to say that the priority in our community is our kids and our kids' success and support and having access to this. And I think our community will answer that call. I'm confident of that. And I guess the question I would have when we talk about administering a contract, what does that look like as far as FTEs? I mean, it's oversight of a contract that Campfire is taking care of, but is that a quarter of an FTE of administrative staff? I mean, I don't know what that looks like. So I guess that would be some of the questions I would have as a school board member as we move forward.
Well, certainly as these conversations have been going on and doing all of the research and the conversations that continue, it's a little bit larger chunk than I would expect it to be. In my experience, the relationship is really between the on-site staff and the principals, the on-site Campfire staff and the principals and the school staff. That's where a lot of the issues get worked out. As the contract administrator, I've scheduled quarterly and/or monthly meetings and kind of facilitated those as best I can. I check in with Campfire regularly, and I try and check in with the school district regularly as well to see how it's going, see if there's anything that needs to be done. But I would say the bulk of the conversations from my experience, and I'm sure Campfire and the school district might have a different one, the work really happens on site as the programs are evolving and as each of the staff teams are getting to know each other with the school district and Campfire together.
The only thing I would add is, unfortunately, the way that our childcare system works right now, other than ERDC, what you're pointing to is the budget is on the back of parents. And there have been lots of studies that have been coming out that your experience, unfortunately, is not unique. I think last week a study came out that 14 states parents pay double their mortgage for childcare, and childcare providers are struggling. So, as much as you all in your legislative agendas can be talking, Congresswoman Bonamici is an incredible advocate. We need a long-term federal funding source that supports after school. This is not a nice to have. This is a critical need for our communities. And until we have public funding for childcare, it will always fall on the backs of families, which will mean the families with the most resources are the only ones that are going to be able to access it, unless you have a provider who's actively trying to work against that, which we do. But without the community support and fundraising, the only tool we have to use is ERDC.
And I think the community support and fundraising speaks volumes about where you place your priority as a community for your kids. And, I know Boys and Girls Club was mentioned. I worked with a donor down in Eugene that happened to be the major donor that supported the construction of the Boys and Girls Club in Albany. And when you drive into Albany and you see that, that speaks volumes about where you place your importance around your kids and your kids' success in your community. And so I think this is an opportunity that it is a call to action to our community. Where do we place that value, and what do we want to say about our priorities for our children in McMinnville?
First, I'm just curious what Westland and Portland Metro are doing to sustain their program funding.
We charge a lot more in Westland and in Portland, and so there's not anything specific that the districts are doing. Again, they have a contract with us. They don't have an active partnership where they're trying to fund childcare or anything like that. So again, it is on the back of parents. We do have a larger percentage of families that are able to donate more, so we have a larger percent of families that are giving to our collective care fund in Westland and in Portland. But beyond that again is still community fundraising. It's not institutional partners.
Do they want to extend their reach? All joking aside, I have every confidence that if Campfire can maintain and is maintaining in the Portland metro area and Westland school districts, that they can do it here with facility space and that collaborative agreement, without, like President Garvin said, without the city's involvement. I do have some reservations and concerns that there is a desire or ability to maintain the agreement. Childcare, I mean, it is no secret that I am a parent to a very neurospicy child and have a lot of challenges with that. And so the importance of having not just childcare, but childcare that will accept and be flexible to the neurodivergent population is hard to find. And whether or not it's hard to pay for is an entirely different animal when you're a parent. So it's beyond important. I don't have anything to add that hasn't already been said. So, but thank you for the historical information for those who haven't lived here since before.
I greatly appreciate the presentations tonight. It's very, very informative to me, and I've been here quite a while. I remember dancing at the first Mayor's Ball. Not as a counselor, though. Well, maybe I was. 2009, I was. Golly. I truly hope that, some form of community support could step in to fill this gap. It obviously is a need. I didn't use it with my children. They came and did their homework at my office, but, not everybody has those resources either. So I know it's a definite need, and I hope. But I do not see, I think the school district and the city both have kind of extended their resources over many years, and it's just kind of reaching a point where it's not going to be feasible that much longer.
Dr. Brockett, do you know about the estimated costs that we put into the busing and the extra services that we provide for after-school care? I know I'm catching you off guard.
I could get those numbers, send it out to everybody, but busing, we do provide busing from each school to their homes. So that would be the big cost.
Yeah.
Facilities are open, there's some electric, but we're there cleaning anyway, so I wouldn't say that's the cost. I would say busing would be the cost we'd be looking at that comes on the back of the school district.
The point is, we both have costs associated with this program that are
Absolutely.
contributed.
Personnel too. Our principals are working, they're spending their time in collaboration with Campfire and helping organize and ensure that that continues to go. So we have some FTE commitment time from our principals as well that are in each of those schools.
Okay, and as far as the question Councilor Gary asked of you're curious to where this goes, I can't speak for the whole board, but I don't see how our body takes up this issue beyond the fact that we have buildings and we have buses. I don't know where it goes. I really don't. That the McMinnville School District takes on the issue of where do we go from here? Because we have buildings and buses and services that contribute to this program, and we have a fairness issue. That's really what's on the table here. We have two buckets of students. We have those that can pay it and those that can't.
Chair Bazan, if I might.
Please.
I think the crux of the issue is that we've got a program that has all sorts of skeletons in the closet and baggage that comes with it, and now we've got this savior that comes in that provides a much more equitable solution, and everybody loves that under Campfire. The city, as Adam says, it's not part of the city's core services. It's not part of the district's core services. No one wants to see this program not succeed, but no one wants to be the holder of the contract.
Thank you.
I'm not speaking for
No,
the board, but I think that's maybe a fair summary, is the city wants out of the business of after-school childcare. The district was never in that business, and we need to come up with a community partner who wants to sign that contract, or we need to say that this was a good run, spend the money, and let the program end.
And we have the equity issue involved with it, right? That's the lingering factor out there. And I don't want to speak for our CEO, and I'll yield the rest of my time to her, but I don't know if it was, sorry, Zach, if it was you or Adam that asked that question. I'm curious where the school district goes from here. I don't know if we take this up. We have a great vendor. We have a working relationship that is dissolving within it's on a time frame, and that's where we're at. We have buildings and we have buses.
Okay, before this goes to everybody, I'm still one of the people at this table, so when you conclude your remarks, I'll make mine, and then we will go into a broader conversation. So please, if you'll conclude your remarks, I just know we're getting jump in over here and over there, and we're about to get some over here, and I'd like to keep this orderly moving forward, especially as we get into the harder part of the conversation.
Yeah, well, like I said, I would yield my time to the superintendent.
Great, thank you. We'll come back to staff. Thank you. I'm going to throw a little bit more on the table here. So first of all, for those of you that came to the State of the City address, thank you so much. You would have heard me talk about childcare as one of the two greatest challenges that our community faces, housing and childcare. You also would have heard that what I strongly believe, which is that the wealth of our community is really the health of our children. So to that end, I see childcare, after-school childcare, as being critical. And what the variety of issues we're trying to address, I'm not sure what your equity issue is. I hear that we're achieving better equity with Campfire in this place as a childcare provider. What I haven't heard conversation about, and some of these things that really terrify me about this game of hot potato right now is, one is that nearly 25% of our children under the age of 18 are living below the federal poverty level. Since the pandemic, it was higher than this. I believe your chronic absenteeism for junior and high school students, I think it's down to 28%. I think it was close to 40% for a while. I know that we have kids dropping out at age 11. I know that we have parents keeping older kids home to take care of younger kids because of the lack of regional child care. I know that people report out in schools, teachers talk about that they see major increases in gang activity, increases in drug use happening in our middle schools. And so those are all bad things that are going to get worse. If you're not in school from age 11, you're not going to be most likely able to secure a job, show up for one, live independently. I say all of that to say that after school care, to me, it is absolutely critical. And I'm honestly not sure why we're in the game of hot potato that seems to be kind of bouncing around here. And I'll tell you why I don't understand. I don't understand why, because everything that I read, the IGA, all of the history, doesn't point towards a dissolution of a relationship. It points to a plan to transfer the contract to the school district after 3 years. And then as Mr. Towery, Ms. Brockett, Mr. Bison know, in the meeting that we had, the four of us had, where you said that you didn't want to carry that contract, well, as you know, my immediate response was, well, then we have to do something for another year. We can't have childcare end right now. So here we are with our one additional year of this planned handoff. It is not that I don't think that our community as a whole has a responsibility to provide these services. I think collectively, humanity, we do. It's not in our purview as a city, it's not in your purview as a school district. However, we have this shared population that does not have a critical or is at risk of losing this critical service. And so what's going to happen to these other numbers when our elementary school kids aren't getting homework assistance and don't have a place to go after school? Are our dropout rates going to go lower than age 11? Is our chronic absenteeism going to go up? What's going to happen in our community when we have generations of students that haven't been educated? To me, that's terrifying, and I know that after-school care is critical. While I wasn't a KOB kid, it's because I was a restaurant kid, so I was supervised by many, many people while I was able to do my homework and spend time in a safe environment after school, and I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. I think I would like to point the part of the conversation back into the fundraising. So you brought up a couple fundraising things, but realistically, what are the effective tools that you would need to do to fundraise adequately to support this project? That's one question. And how do you do those in conjunction with other bodies? And I mean, people can talk about the Mayor's Ball all day long. You look at the numbers, that is not fundraising. It is a feel-good community event that in the end was not actually fundraising. So you can't call it fundraising when it doesn't raise any funds. I'm not saying it was ineffective in its early years. Clearly it was very, very effective originally. So what are our realistic fundraising options to support this programming going forward? Is there any reason that KOB doesn't turn over the remaining funds to Campfire Now and let you parse them out over time, as opposed to continuing yet another level of interaction and aforementioned potential bureaucracy? Another question I have, and this isn't related to the city school district figuring this out, but please explain to me, you said that your county funds are going to be for summer programming only, but over the next 2 years, and then you said they were ARPA funds. I could have this incorrect, but I thought all ARPA funds had to be spent down by the beginning of this, or the end of this year, right? So that's a question for me, and that kind of ties to the other one. If you're keeping pots of money that you're distributing, so if your county ARPA funds are meant to pay for 2 seasons of summer care, but really it would be illegal for you to hold those funds, you'd have to move to fulfill the express desire of the county to pay for 2 seasons. You can't actually do that, right? Or maybe there's another function you injected in there that gets around the legal aspect of those county funds. Maybe if they just gave you the money and you administer it, maybe that takes care of it. I don't know. But so that's one of the one more of my questions. And my last question is really a question of why, because I hear you say, we don't want the responsibility of the contract. I've heard you say that, Dr. Brockett, multiple times, that you don't want the responsibility of the contract. I kind of heard that from Mr. Benner as well. So why? What is the benefit to the city being the contract holder if we are not the facility, we're not the busing, it's not our staff, it's not our service population? What is the purpose of the city holding that contract and that kind of being the sole function, or all the administrative work that goes along with it? Or maybe that's the reason you want it. Maybe you don't want the administrative work. But otherwise, I really can't figure out why it would be necessary for the city to hold the contract, because we don't have any other connection to the programming the people in the programming, the parents, the teachers, the principals that are working with Campfire staff, access to the buildings, a complaint system. I mean, we're just not overlapped in that way. So I cannot wrap my mind around why this is even kind of a hot potato instead of, hey, we're at the end of this planned time. The plan was to turn this over to you for you to carry the contract in whole. And instead saying, hey, we really need to figure out some creative fundraising in conjunction with the city because the fundraising you previously did has run out of time, as those funds have run out, or whatever the other ask is for support. So maybe if you could help me understand why the city's being asked to carry the contract, that would be great. And I would just ask staff to answer some of those funding questions first, and then Chair, I know that you're anxious to answer that question for me as well, but if we could get some of the check boxes on funding off, and then we can go to the larger philosophical question that may be a little more take a little bit more energy.
Yeah, I was just double checking. Our contract with the county says that we have until December 31st of 2026 to spend the ARPA funds, and that's how they're being spread across this summer and next summer.
Okay.
To the mayor's point, ARPA dollars were, our legal review was that they had to be spent by the end of 2025, is what I remember.
If I can comment on this, I know when it comes to the Parkway Committee, we've been talking about needing to have ARPA dollars spent by the end of 2026 for the bypass. So there are definitely some areas where ARPA dollars can be spent to the end of 2026.
Can I just add a little bit of that? So the original act required that the funds be obligated by December 31st, 2024 and spent down by December 31st, 2026. There are some actions that agencies can take to mitigate that spin down a little bit. For instance, we took our unspent and unobligated ARPA dollars and applied them to lost revenue, and then we transferred that to another fund. So it's essentially been spent from an ARPA perspective. We're continuing to spend it down. I don't know whether the county did that with their funds or not. In any case, it sounds like the relationship they have figured out meets those expenditure requirements.
Okay, great. That's the ARPA one. Turning over the funds, creative fundraising, and then we'll come back to the hot potato.
Turning over the funds, that's a KOB Inc. question, I think. Why are they not turning the fund, all the remaining about approximately $250,000 to Campfire today? That's the question. They have not been asked to do that, and I think they, like all of us, were getting used to this relationship. They didn't have a formal even grant program when Campfire started coming in, so we kind of developed it. I don't know that they would be opposed to it, but I think we're into this is the way KOB Inc. has done the granting, is on an annual cycle. We didn't know what Campfire was going to ask originally. We didn't know the timeline and frequency that they were going to be asking, and so we were kind of playing it year by year for a while. If that's something that Campfire and KOB Inc. want to agree to, that would be made at a KOB Inc. board meeting.
Thank you. And then last on that was other creative fundraising that you do with communities or districts, organizations that could be applied here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's actually one opportunity right now that we are unable to go after just because it's too large for us to consider, but could be a collaborative grant. The state of Oregon has released child care infrastructure funds. They're putting out, I believe, I might get the number wrong. I think it's a minimum of $25 million this year, $25 million next year, and they're specifically meant to build infrastructure to be able to expand childcare. I apologize, I don't remember who said it, but somebody brought up tonight the idea of a boys and girls type club building where you could bring all the kids together. From our perspective, that's a cheaper program to run. That's an easier program to run. Larger programs actually tend to be easier because you have a larger staff, but they're all kind of in the same space instead of splitting them out across 5 separate buildings. So it's a more efficient program. We don't have the capacity as an agency to go after one of those infrastructure grants, but that could be something that, a collaborative group between the city and the school district or the city alone wanted to look at. We would be happy to apply jointly and be the provider. Those grants are up to $2 million. that communities can go after. And it's specifically because one of the biggest limiting factors in Oregon is the number of actual buildings that can provide childcare. It's a very specific licensing need and code that has to be met. So that's an opportunity that is available right now. The grants are just sent out. I got it through Yamhill County actually, but that's not something Campfire can go after. We don't have the ability to launch a $2 million construction project this year, but.
Well, when you say infrastructure, so you're talking specifically about the development of a new building that would centralize, or do you also mean infrastructure? Could that money be used for staffing as part of the kind of social infrastructure?
There are several different grant opportunities. There's a planning grant. Most of them are meant for building, either expanding existing buildings to add new classrooms or building new buildings, and those are the largest grants. And so that could be a new, sorry, I'm just riffing at this point, but it could be a new community center that does fall in the purview of the city, or, but that where, childcare and after-school programming was centralized. Again, not something that Campfire could do alone, but that's one pot of money that is out there right now.
Is that through Children's Institute? You said it was from the state, and you also mentioned the county.
It's through the state. I got the notification about the grant dollars being available through the county, but it's a state. It's through the Department of Early Learning and Care.
Okay. Well, then that, I think, takes us to the larger philosophical question, my why. Chair?
So I guess, and again, I don't speak for the board, but I was trying to answer your question. So the city runways off of this program in the next 2 years. Those are your words, runway, right? That's what the agreement was, runway, 1 year?
1 year. The
Okay.
funding that KOB Inc. has is potentially 2 years.
Okay, so the city runways off in 1 year. Other creative fundraising models don't come through. And we've got a great vendor in our buildings, and now we can't scholarship. That's the issue I think the district has.
But my question is, why do you want the city to hold the contract?
I don't know if the city should hold the contract. You asked, what's the concern of the district? And again, I would defer to the Superintendent Brockett.
Well, to be clear, I asked why you want the city to hold the contract. That's my question, is why the city should hold the contract.
I don't think the city should hold the contract. I'm just answering your question of the runway goes, we run out of it, and Campfire can't find a sustainable model funding source to scholarship the kids that we care about from an equity standpoint. Then we just become a pay-to-play daycare building. And only the ones that can afford it go. And that's where we'd be.
I feel like our conversation might be a little disconnected, but let's move on. Dr. Brock, did you want to add anything? You're leaning into your mic, and then we'll go over to Councilor Peralta.
I'll let Councilor Peralta go first, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I'm not understanding the disconnect in terms of the contracting. I certainly understand what Chair Bazan was saying about the what happens when the scholarship monies run out. And that's a point well made. But if the question before us today is you're wanting to hand off the contracting of this to the school board for the remaining term that we have the additional resources, it sounds like the chair is saying that that's not an issue for them. And then the other question is probably something that we really wouldn't be answering in this meeting, which is, are we going to be able to get some people who will be willing to step forward to try and fundraise into this program? And is that actually a workable model for funding childcare in this city? I don't think it is. I wish it was. But I don't think it is right now. So if that's the case, then we're looking at a sunsetting of this program tonight, and maybe making a call for people to step up and attempt to take on the additional fundraising and do those sorts of things. And I think that clock was set when we started this process.
Yeah, you said I want. What I'm doing is looking at the agreement.
Please don't personalize it. I am not talking about you. I'm just saying that at the point of this meeting, I didn't schedule the meeting. This meeting was scheduled between you and Chair Bazan. So there was a purpose to that. And it seems like the purpose was to hand off the contract, figure out next steps for this program, and to determine what's going to happen over the next 2 years. I'm actually a little bit more optimistic because I didn't think we had 2 years left of runway for this program. So a year and a half or whatever it is, it's more time than I was expecting. So then to me, the question is, are there going to be community leaders who are willing to step up to take this on as a volunteer project? Sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish.
Jumping in. I mean, it looks, that to me is part of what we need to answer tonight, but it's really secondary. I think the main items of business were to let people know where the program is going, that we're reaching the end of the road, and that we need to figure out what the next steps are. So, but it seems like that one of the conflicts that you thought was there maybe isn't, which is the handing off of the contract temporarily. So that also to me is good news. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'd look to Dr. Brockett. Am I incorrect in that? Is the school district willing to carry the contract with a future provider?
No, I think that's where we keep going back. I want to thank you, Susan, for the historical context. Josh and I have got to spend more time, the three of us, than we have in the past years. I think what we have to remember, going back to historical context, this started, be it the mayor's ball, and be it that was just happened to be part of the city, to this nonprofit that became KOB. It was a partnership. And when it was turned over to me when I came in 2021, the Campfire contract had already moved forward. It was handed over to me as a partnership. And we moved forward with it as a partnership with the city and the school district to make sure that we have childcare for after-school care. So as a school district, when I say I don't want to do this, I want to have it for students. I can't, and I'll say I, speaking on my behalf as a school district superintendent, own the responsibility for childcare after school. That is not something I can do. And when you say when the city steps away and it's only our name on that contract, so I sign the contract and say, yeah, we're in it, and all of a sudden we don't have a fundraiser, we don't have money to scholarship, and I have to say, now we have to stop it because there's no scholarship funds. It looks as if the district doesn't want to support childcare. That is not what we want to do. So the conversation was supposed to, the conversation was supposed to go to, how do we find another possible nonprofit that would be willing to fulfill that role as KOB for that fundraising partnership? Because as Chair Bazan had spoken about, we cannot just have the haves getting after-school childcare in our schools while the have-nots have no place to go. And when we talk about school dropouts, we talk about those not participating. It's not the parents that can afford childcare that is going to suffer any of those consequences if we don't find a solid partnership. The one-year extension is incredible. It has opened up conversations that had never opened before, including with the county and some other, I won't name them because I don't want to put them on the spot here, some other nonprofits that have stepped out and said, how do we get involved? So I believe from a superintendent's point of view, we come together, we continue to engage in these conversations and find that organization that wants to be the nonprofit that then owns the scholarshiping, owns that. We will always provide buildings. We understand buildings are scarce around here and finding a place to provide. We have no problem continuing our transportation. What we can't do is go into a single contract with just ourselves, hoping with hope that some company each or some organization each year will give us money, because there will be a year they don't come through. Then it's going to be on this school board and the superintendent that all of a sudden we don't care about kids, we don't provide daycare, childcare, and that's what we don't want to get into. So we want to continue to engage. I'll be with Chair Peralta and say, or Commissioner Joe, we didn't say we wanted to have all the answers tonight. We wanted to open the conversation. There was a comment you made about some of the concerns around dropout. I will tell you, if childcare ends in this district the way we have it now, be it the city, be it the county, be it the school district, not only are we going to see issues at the elementary level not having childcare, you're going to see all of these sports, all of these activities, all of these great things happening at high schools and middle schools go away. Because if I was a parent that lost my after-school childcare, affordable childcare, and I had a kid in middle school or high school playing sports, their days are over in sports or activities, they're going to become my childcare after school. And if we want to get more dropouts, if we want to see more issues with houselessness and all of the other issues we see, this can be the one. It's like that third leg of a stool. You pull that one leg out, it is going to have a ripple effect on this entire community, because we are going to lose kids not only at the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. We're going to see these outstanding numbers we're seeing right now, getting kids re-engaged. So we talk about high school dropouts. Many of our kids only come to school because of sports. That's okay, or they come because of an activity. They don't love math, possibly, but they do show up for the after school. They come because they want to be involved. So it is a whole entire community issue, and the fact that we've had these conversations, and we've never had people reach out to us before and say, how do we help? So we do have a community that wants to come around and help us, and I think in the next year, I believe that with the right conversations, the positive steps moving forward, we can find that nonprofit that links back with the KOB that will then become that name with a partnership. We'll continue to provide our part within the IG. We don't do anything now except sign and say we agree to provide these things. The city agrees to what they agreed to. You do the contract for us, but we can get the contract done up with that third name on it, that third nonprofit, because really it's KOB that is that third leg of the stool that's keeping this together. It's the fundraising for scholarships that's keeping it together. We have to have that third leg. So we have to figure out who that is going to be to step up, whichever organization that is. I know, Josh, we won't mention names, but I know one's already reached out as a possibility. That's where we need to go. So it's not the city against the school district, but this joined originally as a joint commitment. So if we're not going to have the joint commitment with KOB on the side, it wasn't the city's responsibility, it was KOB. What we're missing is not the city, is not the district, we're going to miss the KOB connection. So we need someone to fill that hole in, to be that third leg. And yes, I will always say, I know it's not city for childcare, I get that, we can say whatever we want. I will always disagree, because I don't believe that it is the school district's responsibility to start the kids at 6:30 in the morning, take them till 7 o'clock at night. If I start making that our responsibility, we're not going to have teachers in schools, because nobody's going to work that long and nobody can adhere. So yes, it is everybody's, because every time a kid drops out of sports, drops out of school, has to go home rather than being involved, it is a city, a county, it's all of our problems. So I just think it's continuing to have the passionate conversation about who is going to step up and help fill that void that we are so going to lose without KOB. And I don't know who that is, but I do believe, listening to the conversations that have already started, there could be one or more organizations that come together to do that, and we have a year to decide how that looks. But never, when I came into this, was it sold to me from Dr. Russell that this was ours. It was actually sold to me that we are now moving away from this KOB into Campfire to make it sustainable. Very strongly stated, this should never become a school district responsibility. We don't do daycare. We provide support so others can use our buildings and our resources so that we do have after-school care for kids. So it's not that we don't want it. We want it more than all of you. We have the chronic absenteeism. We're the ones trying to increase that. We're the ones trying to get kids in school, trying to keep them engaged. We want that. We need that, but we have to have that third leg of the stool to move forward. So it's not that we don't want to do it, we're just not going to own it. We can't own it. I don't want to put my name on owning that, because when it does go away, if organizations step off, then it looks like school district doesn't care about kids, and we care passionately about students, and that's our whole mission. So I think it's just got to be that conversation of where's the third leg of that stool going to be, so we can continue doing, as Josh has said several times, what no other community around us does. And I just think that is something that everybody in this room should be more than proud of. Everybody listening to this meeting, I hope everybody's proud of the fact we do something that no other community does to support our families and our students. And why would anybody want to stop doing that? I can't fathom it. Why wouldn't we want to just continue to find the way to keep that work moving forward so we can do what no other community does, and that's support all families and all students so that they can do after-school care. So that's where I'm at with it. I just think it's, to say it's being handed off, I think is what continues to be that conversation, there has to be some joint partnership and continue to be joint partnership because it affects every single one of us. And it will affect the city. It'll affect the school district, I know that, but I also know it'll also affect the city as a whole if we lose our after-school care.
Anyway, Councilor Peralta, and then Board Committee Member Towery, and then Council President.
I'll withhold my comment. Thank you.
I guess as I listen to this, we get too often into the conversation from a place of scarcity as opposed to a place of abundance. And, I know the question that keeps coming up is, what if it goes away? The question I would pose is, what if it doesn't? We've got a glide path that was given multiple years. We were down to a year. We've extended a year. So as a nonprofit executive, my question would be then, build the strategic plan that gets us to what we need. What is the goal? What is the emphasis and importance that we're placing to make sure our kids have the support and positive environments to help them be successful? And what does that look like? And what do we need? What do we need from a fundraising standpoint? What do we need from a contract administrative standpoint? And we set that strategic plan in place. And working from a place of abundance, if we do all the things and plan appropriately and are thoughtful about our approach to this, we have an opportunity for this to be wildly successful. But it's a matter of planning and not just saying it's done in 2 years because this old fundraising ran out. No nonprofit would survive if that's how we operated. So, that then becomes, how do we make sure that our organization is strong and has the resources that it needs, and we plan for those resources of what we need and start on that path. This conversation, I certainly hope, has opened up the opportunity for our community to engage. And I'm very confident we set a strategic plan. I'm watching it happen with housing that's coming out of our urban renewal, and trying to find how we get more affordable housing happening in our community. And that's thoughtful planning and strategy that's in place. And that's the piece where we have the opportunity now. And that instead of saying this is just going to go away and what if it does, that we operate from a place of, how do we make this successful, and what will it take for us as a school district, for us as a community, to make sure that we are providing this opportunity for our kids to be successful. So all of the doom and gloom that we talk about that could and probably will happen if this is not there, doesn't, because we've planned for a different scenario and a different outcome in the long range. And so I guess that's where I look at, how do we solve this problem to make sure that we have this available for our kids and our families? And I don't think it is that complicated of a problem for us to solve. We have an amazing organization that has a good track record, that knows how to fundraise, that knows how to work with families, that has licensed staff that is there to provide quality care for our kids. We've got all the foundational pieces to create success. And that's where I would love to see us working for, how do we create the continued success as we go forward? So that the legacy that we leave is not that we just said, oh, we ran out of money, but the legacy that we leave is that the priority is placed on our kids and making sure this is available to all of our kids, and how do we plan accordingly for that?
Thank you. Council President.
Thank you, Board Member Towery. Couple questions. I'll take them one at a time. First one for you, Josh, is you mentioned you're in Portland Public Schools and Westland School District. Who is the contract administrator in both those agreements?
It's the school district.
Okay, and your understanding of other after-school child care providers, do they typically have a third-party administrator, whether that's a nonprofit or the city they operate in, or do they operate with the school district?
I can't speak for, I know in the other districts that we're in, they have other providers, and they are the direct contract administrator for all of their child care providers.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that there would be some economies of scale and some lower costs or some sustainability if you were to collaborate and consolidate locations. So my question to the school board and Superintendent Brockett would be, is there ability to move after-school care into 1 or 2 locations versus spread out between 6 locations within the district?
I think that Josh would be better at answering that, but we only have so many square footage. Our biggest location in any school is the cafeteria, is which Josh uses the majority of the time. And we're able to give that to him almost every night until we have to kick you out for an event. So no, I can't see us having, now you could correct me, I don't see us having a space large enough to move everything to one site.
Yeah, without having the square footages in front of me, I wouldn't be able to calculate whether or not 177 kids could fit in a space. But we could look at what spaces are available in the schools to see what's possible, but it is a limitation based on licensing.
Understood. I was just thinking if you went from 6 locations down to 2 locations, i.e. bus kids to the middle schools that they're closest to respectively, you would have economies of scale to be more efficient with your dollars. Next question, or I guess this might be more for Susan, but the pay-to-play model and the equity lens has came up multiple times, and through the presentation tonight, it would seem that Campfire is more equitable than our KOB. I remember one TAC committee meeting back in 2018 where it was learned that about 80% of Memorial students were school district staff's kids, and that school's slots were filled up within the first 10 minutes because parents, i.e. teachers and affluent parents, would stand on the steps and wait to register. So I mean, if we're looking at data, it would seem that Campfire is quite a bit more equitable than KOB and Mayor's Ball.
And I think I would add that we didn't, through KOB, since we only had one funding tool, we didn't measure all of the data points that Campfire now measures. But without a doubt, Memorial filled up the quickest, like that.
Okay, thank you. And then for Josh, with the ARPA dollars and kind of all those different money pots, it's hard to do some back of the napkin math off the slide show presentation, but we've talked about fundraising multiple times through multiple individuals. What is your annual need from a fundraising target for scholarships?
So it costs about $4,000 a year to provide after-school programming through Campfire in McMinnville to one child. The majority of the scholarshiping, that's one point that I did want to make. When you talk about moving to a pay-for-play model, even in that model, we would be accessing ERDC, which ensures that your lowest income, highest need families who need the service the most would be receiving scholarshiping. It wouldn't be coming from fundraising, it would be coming from federal funding. But the largest part of that amount of support that was listed having been provided over the last 3 years is ERDC, not KOB. So there is still the ability to serve families who aren't able to afford care through ERDC. Where the fundraising really comes in handy is that group of families for whom they make too much to qualify for ERDC, not enough to afford childcare, and it's that group in the middle, which obviously has a really high need. But I did want to just push back a little bit. Like, we would still be bringing low-income, high-need families into program even without scholarship dollars because of our ability to leverage federal dollars.
And to go back to that question, what is your annual need for a community organization to step up and fundraise to make the district comfortable with scholarshiping abilities?
I'm just doing really quick math. If we were at full capacity and we wanted to serve every single, fill every single slot, and we had to fill the other 123 slots with fully scholarshiped families, that would be $492,000 a year. Most families don't require 100% scholarship. So we have families that we offer a sliding scale that, it goes from 90%, 100% scholarship down to 10%. So it probably wouldn't be that high, but just back of the napkin math, it's $4,000 a year per student that we would add to program if they needed 100% of their costs covered.
Okay, try this again. You had 177 kids this year. How much did you need a scholarship outside of the ERDC money?
I think we allocated about 85,000 before this last payment came from KOB Inc. throughout the year. And then we had about another 26 or 30,000 that was used to pay off the balances of the ERDC family. So it was about a little over 110,000 last year. That was KOB Inc. money.
Okay, thank you. And so my question would then go to Chair Bazan or Superintendent Brockett. Knowing that your counterparts in Portland Public Schools and Westland School District administer the contract for their after-school care provider, you're not actually providing after-school care, you're administering the contract for the buildings that you own and operate. What is the hang-up to administer that contract?
I would have to speak to their use of the equity lens. I don't know the communities well enough to know if they were smaller and we have less access. So how do they make sure, I would have to ask, as Josh mentioned, they're comfortable with getting enough donations from the outside to offset the scholarship needs. Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't get enough parents that just say, I'll pay extra to cover all of our scholarship needs. I would have to look into that to see what they do to get a better understanding of how they carry that without ensuring they can meet the scholarship needs of all students that need childcare. Does that make sense? Because that's our biggest concern, is that we don't get to a point where we're having to subsidize out of school district money childcare because we don't have the funds to pay for the scholarships, because we can't tell kids they can't get it if we don't have scholarships. So figuring out how they fill that gap, and if they care to fill that gap. I don't know that with those two communities. I mean, Portland Public is totally different because access to other types of after-school care, I am sure, I've never lived in Portland, but I am sure they have access to other types of after-school care. And I don't know what Wilsonville has either. I don't know what other access, so I would want to find that out first. Because are they just saying, we'll do this, and if they can't go here, then they go to Boys and Girls Club, or they can go here, or they can go there, the YMCA, I don't know that. So, or are they really the only, because what we're being asked is to be the only, more or less, consistent after-school care for all of McMinnville. And I don't know what they have to offer, so I would have to get that information.
But isn't that what you signed on for in Lafayette that you spoke to earlier?
Lafayette is doing that as a nonprofit through that church, is doing that, but it was signed off as a nonprofit with that church.
So when they step away in 2 years, that's the same thing as if we ran out of money in 2 years, correct?
We would have to go back to, but again, you guys even offering to bring, Campfire had to carry the scholarship funding for Lafayette and use more of their funds for Lafayette so to balance that equity issue so that we weren't spending more money out in Lafayette out of what Campfire had available, we had to find another access to provide the childcare out there.
I guess I'm having a mental block on why you can sign a Lafayette contract when you can still be holding the bag, but you can't sign a McMinnville contract when you can still be holding the bag when you have 2 years of guaranteed scholarship and you have no years of guaranteed scholarship besides your year-to-year contract with your nonprofit volunteer after-school child care provider, Lafayette.
That would be another one. We can engage in the one out there. We just have a different city we're working with. They never signed in, Lafayette never signed into any kind of joint commitment to even offer childcare out there. So if you could, or after school care. So if you look at when we finally added Campfire, that was a fight on my side because we offered nothing to Lafayette because we got nothing from the city. So we couldn't offer anything to Lafayette until, what was it, December of last year. That we just didn't offer it to Lafayette at all. And for my own equity purpose, if we can't continue to do it through Campfire in an equitable manner, I had to find a way, because we have it in McMinnville, finding something we can offer out in Lafayette, because when I came here, there was not an option for Lafayette. It was done just the 5 schools here because it was in McMinnville. So Lafayette was left out. So trying to balance that out, knowing that we had the partnership here, we came up with a partnership out at Lafayette to rebalance, because, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but because we weren't getting the KOB scholarships out there, How did that, or did you guys scholarship KOB out there?
Just to be clear, KOB Inc., the 501c3, serves the McMinnville School District. Those scholarship funds were given for all 6 schools from KOB Inc.
Can you clarify what came out? Because I know we had a conversation around the offset of the Lafayette.
Yeah, Washer opened later partly because of demand and staffing. So we had fewer kids registered or families signing up to register at Washer, and we had a harder time finding staff. When it did open, it didn't open until December of 2022, but it was funded like our other schools. There were less KOB Inc. dollars there, but there were some. It was mostly ERDC, but we were only serving 15 kids at Washer.
And even now, we're only serving 17 from your current numbers. So yeah, I'm not saying that, and to be honest, that one was signed off on a 2-year in alignment with what we were doing here, started off last year. So that'll be a conversation with Lafayette, separate with their city, and one that will have to be taken up with their mayor on how we continue after school care out there. But there's a lot that Lafayette doesn't get right now that McMinnville gets, including Parks and Rec and some of the other issues that we have inequities out there automatically.
Okay, I have Councilor Chenoweth, Board Member Warmbier, and then Councilor Geary after that.
I just wanted to say I got to leave. I was supposed to be out of here at 8:15, but I wanted to comment. Some of the comments that Superintendent Brockett has said has actually given me some hope on the direction that this is heading. And I think that we need to not gloss over the top of that. If there's conversations already occurring where community members are reaching out to try to help bridge the gap here, I don't think we want to gloss over that in the process of the technical discussion about who can carry the contract and who cannot carry the contract. I think that's very hopeful. I really appreciated, I don't know the proper title for a school board person, board member, there we go, Board Member Towery's comments about how you run a nonprofit and how you look at this as an opportunity to fundraise rather than as a negative. Again, I think we need to keep this on the, if I could say so, on the focus of the positive opportunities that we can bring out of this conversation. And there's 2 right there that I thought were stellar positive conversations. I did have one question. I'm not understanding, and maybe I'm going to show some real naivete here, why the city or the school district needs to be carrying this contract. It's a private, nonprofit entity providing a service to a community who needs funding from some source. The school district is willing to provide the building and some services, that's great, but ultimately, where does there need to be a contract here other than between you and the people you're providing the service to, which is the parents of the children?
Most of the contract details in all districts, but we're accessing buildings. We have access to students. The districts need to protect their own liability and ensure that anyone in their buildings is following their rules and that we know kind of what the safety protocols are. They need to make sure that we have staff that are criminal background checked, and we're accessing their space. And so that's what the contracts usually talk about, is how we access space, when we can access space, when we can't, what are the protocols for safety.
So I'm a volunteer PE teacher for a local school, and we use the facilities of the school district. And we go out to their website and we fill out a contract to use the facility. But that's not a contract to carry a service. That's a contract to use the facility, which is what you're talking about. And part of that contract requires that I provide my insurance to show that my liability is going to protect them from anything that happens while I'm using their facility. That's not a contract that requires a contract for the services. That's a contract to use their equipment. That seems to me all you really need from the school district, unless I'm missing something here. And the real contract is between you and the customer. The customer is not the school district nor the city. The customer is the parent of the children that you're watching for services. And again, I may be off in left field here, but I've been listening to this whole conversation, and I'm, from a business perspective, not understanding why either of us need to be carrying a contract with you per se, other than the use of the facilities. maybe that's a way around this. With that, I got to go. Thank you all for what you've, the input and the great comments.
Even though Councilor Chenoweth has to leave, if either of you'd like to respond to that, just to kind of get to, so that we can all hear that response, I think that'd be great. And then we'll go to School Board Member Warmbier after that.
I would just say, not fully understanding, I believe the situation and the relationship that Councilor Chenoweth just described is the one that we were headed towards in the 3-year agreement, which is the rental agreement would happen between the school district and the provider. And then the provider would deliver the services to the families.
And I can't really speak. We don't generally ask districts for contracts. They're usually what districts have asked. They have come in different forms. We do other programming, not licensed childcare, but other programming in buildings and districts where it's just an MOU. But for our own protection, there usually is some written document that talks about like what our staff are expected to do, what insurance we have to carry, that we like to have documented just to protect ourselves. But what form it takes is usually determined by the institutional partner, not us.
Did you have an answer as well, Chair, before we move on?
I just would clarify, it's a facility use agreement, and there's tiers within that facility use agreement on priority of who can use those buildings, and the, for lack of a better word, core values of the McMinnville School District's wording is in there as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go Warmbier, Geary, Menke, Peralta.
I'll pass.
That was fast.
You can add me to the list.
Mine was about the rapid volley between Superintendent Brockett and Director Muir. I didn't realize there was a queue to get into to ask a follow-up for that. But I just want to clarify, what I think I heard you say was, you said that we weren't providing anything out at Washer, and then I heard staff say we were providing. So just wanted to clarify, the ultimate punchline from Susan was that we were providing care out at Washer up until we weren't.
Not until December 2022, correct?
So my understanding of the long-term history is that Washer was not a part of the overall city's KOB services when it started.
Right.
Then it became a part of the city's KOB, one of the provided locations that we did. When KOB stopped, we stopped providing it at Washer. That's different than the funding that comes from KOB Inc.
Right, the city's efforts to another city providing, that's what you're distinguishing between.
Correct, and the city manager and I have had several conversations with the city manager, city managers in Lafayette to let them know, here's the agreement that we have, here's the way we did it. We went to them at the very beginning of this when we realized that there was something pointed out in the assessment that talked about the two different cities and the two different organizations all being within the McMinnville School District.
And then the other point I missed that I want to make sure I understand, you mentioned the mayor of Lafayette. You're contracting with the city to then contract?
We don't contract with the city, so let me correct that. And I wish I could pull it up here, but I can't. We have an agreement for facility use on the tiered level for this organization to come in and provide this care. So it looks a lot different. Lafayette doesn't have a lot of busing. It doesn't have all those commitments that we have in McMinnville due to the smaller scale of it. And when they came in, the biggest part, and we worked with our WSD's legal team to make sure that when they do come in to provide this, that we're covered. So then we made them just go through and get all the same licenses as we would is Chenoweth was saying, when he wanted to use our facilities, we made him go through a facility use. So when he asked, can't we just do a facility use agreement? In a certain tier you can, but it will always require that same kind of documentation. So yeah, it could eventually go to that where it's just facility usage without any kind of agreement. We could look at something like that. It just looks different because we, as Chair Bazan was saying, part of that is the equitable access for that. And when it's totally free, it's equitable. So we don't our tiered for allowing usage has an equity lens to it because there's no cost for the haves, have-nots, so to say, the ones who can and can't afford it. So they would pass our tier. Here, that would look a lot different because of the cost of the program. Not all parents or families can afford the $1,400 a month for the program. So we would have to figure out how to overcome the equity issue.
Josh, can you speak to cost as the sole component of equity when you look at delivering your services to kids?
So when we apply an equity lens, we try and look at who are the families that need support the most. We look at equity from a perspective of giving families what they need to succeed. For some families, the cost is not a barrier, and so we don't offer a discount because it's not a challenge for them. For other families, the cost is a significant discount or significant barrier, and so when we're looking at the equity lens, we're looking at economics, but we're also looking at, some families have two parents, and so for them, it's easier to manage childcare than a family with a single caregiver. We're also looking at families for whom their earning potential is lower because they have, caregivers that are disabled or other areas that the state has identified as kind of critical priority focus populations. And so we prioritize families who come from the state's priorities populations, BIPOC youth, low-income youth, single-parent caregivers.
Thank you. No more questions at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Menke.
I have a question for Superintendent Brockett and also for you, Josh. There used to be a thing called like PTA, parent-teacher organizations, and things like that. And it seems to me like that just seems to be a big gap in this conversation that, is there any organization that gathers the parents together and kind of talks to them about what's happening and about the necessity for fundraising if you want special things and stuff like that?
We do have PTAs, but remember, they're fundraising for the everyday expenses of the schools that we can't afford, the outside activities. So PTAs are fundraising constantly, and that's what we have to be careful is that we do fundraising just to run the extras within our school district. So yes, we have great PTAs. I meet with them once a month, the presidents of the PTA, and they share all the great fundraising they're doing to pay possibly for some of the sporting events or activities that kids can't afford, the book events that are going on. The breakfast, the lunches. Abby can talk a lot about, I can name 1,000 things they fundraise for, but they're the direct services to kids and students in the school at that time.
Okay.
Would they have the resources to go above and beyond to this level? No, unfortunately, those aren't even as big as they used to be.
Okay. But I am saying that this is a broader range of people that know and work for other organizations and would have an interest possibly in providing more funds. To just look at the group of people sitting here and saying, gee, you guys need to come up with an idea to pull this off, I think is a little unrealistic, to be perfectly honest. I know what your school board used to do. Oh, well, not yours, but Mary Alice's. I used to lose Kathy Cape for a month in January for tax season because she was working for the school district. She was working for KOB. That's all she did. So you need some fire in somebody's bellies to get this to happen. And I just think we need a broader range of resources to make that happen.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I will tell you, as much as this conversation seems like we spin, we really aren't. Our phones are ringing finally with community members asking. But yes, going to the PTAs and do you know anybody that would, I will be honest, from the ones who meet with me are usually the moms that really just dedicate times to the schools. I think at this point, we're reaching out. As Josh told me, one organization that reached up and said, one nonprofit that said I might want to, I made a personal time to meet, just have further conversations with them. I'm going to lunch in July with somebody else that might be an opportunity. So yes, we personally will still continue to reach out and try to find that one nonprofit possibly that would at least be able to not do all the fundraising, but be that organization that can get more people pulled in to do the fundraising, because that's just not something we at the school
No, I totally
do.
understand.
But yeah, so I am reaching out that way,
I do.
and I know Josh is, and these conversations have
People that
enriched
are
that.
talking about this, the better chances we have of getting some.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. And I am confident with this one-year extension, which I have to thank the city for, that we have a year to really look at it and find out where we're going to, or several months to start setting up that extra leg to continue to support it, because Josh has done excellent work with us. He continues to be supported, and we've gotten better. I will tell you, this has made us come closer. It has made us structure meetings to have better conversations, and get the principals more engaged that are starting to now reach out and have those conversations. It is something everybody wants. I love what Doris said about, let's come up with a strategic plan for after-school care. I love that. So who organizes that strategic plan, and exactly what do we need to make it happen? I think if we focus that for the next 4 to 5 months, we can really come forward with that plan with full focus on exactly what we need to keep this program going.
Okay, I have Councilor Peralta, but we'll come back to him. I have Council President Garvin, and then Mr. Vollmer, did you want to speak as well? I saw you. Well, if you'd like, I'll put you on the list, and you can decline when the time comes. Council President?
Yeah, first, I just want some clarity on the cost of Campfire. Josh, in your presentation, you mentioned $385 a month. Superintendent Brockett just mentioned $1,400. Obviously, the CFC is $143.46 off the slide, and the EDRC is $4.04 a month. But what is it for somebody to come in and just pay 100%, nothing extra per month?
Yeah, so families can choose between a 1 and a 5-day package. A 1-day package is, and I took notes because I knew this question would likely come up, $185 a month, and it ranges from there. Each day is a little bit extra, and the most expensive package is $375 a month for 5 days, from when the bell rings until 6 p.m., and then some students are in the hour of power, and so then they come after that. They're in school programming a little bit later, but we run till 6.
So where did the $1,400 come from?
That would be a misrepresentation of my conversation, understanding of him. I've never heard and it's been a long conversation, Josh, so I'm sure it's my error, but I've never heard that max payment is $375 a month. So you're saying that's the most any family ever pays?
That's our new billing model that takes place for next school year. So this current school year, we were billing in a different way. We were only billing families 9.5 months. That billing model has changed to help lower costs and spread them out across the year. So if the last year, I don't have that number in front of me. I believe it was $450 was the most that a family would pay.
Okay.
And now it's
So you went from a 9-month billing cycle to a 12-month billing cycle?
Oh, will you clarify, just from hearing some commentary, is that $375 a week or a month?
It's a month.
It's a month.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think that helps with some of the equity speak of affordability. My other question was, when we spoke to facility use agreements, it didn't really seem like anywhere in that definition like the city fits into. We're not really leasing facilities to provide after-school care because you're the provider, correct?
We're the after-school I can't speak to the relationship between the city and the school district, but we are not in a contract with other cities and other places that we provide childcare.
Okay. So that's where I'm wrapped around the axles. I just don't get how there can be a contract with the provider in Lafayette and the school district directly. There can be a provider with Westland School District and Campfire. There can be a contract with Portland Public Schools and Campfire. But there needs to be the city in the middle of this contract. For what reason? Is my question to all policymakers in the room.
Okay, we're going to go back to Councilor Peralta. We're going to Committee Member Vollmer, and then we're going to Committee Member Benner after that, and Chair, I couldn't tell if you also wanted to, no. Okay, so let's go, Councilor Peralta.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Garvin hit on the main issue that I had with his last question to all the policymakers. I guess the second question I'd ask is that it was unclear from the comments about equity whether the fact that people are paying anything is the reason that this is being balked at by the school district? Because it seems like, or if there was maybe a misunderstanding about the nature of the contractual relationship, because I could understand not wanting to be on the hook for having school dollars go towards supporting this program if there's insufficient funds for scholarships. Like that I would get. But to not do a contract over the utilization of the buildings, and it seems like the staff access to the buildings and things like that, which it sounds like how the contracts are being described, that is a little, it's a little more questionable to me. And also I think, I'm not sure whether staff at the district level had really thought through the implications of, as Councilor Garvin was pointing out, what was happening in Lafayette really not being any different than what we're talking about here in Mac. It just seems like they're being treated differently, but there really aren't that different of a situation. You've got a 2-year runway here with scholarships and sufficient resources and an uncertain future beyond that, but that's kind of the same boat in both communities. So I'm not, like Councilor Garvin, I'm not really fully understanding the objection there.
Okay, we will go to School Board Member Volmer now, please.
I think, it's just a general comment, but I think there's been questions about why can't the school board or the school district carry the contract? We could. Why does the city have to be involved? Well, at one time it was a partnership. It was a partnership between our group, between our bodies.
We were the child care provider, though. We staffed the child care provider. We ran that program. We no longer run that program. We haven't ran that program. We are very transparent that we don't intend to ever run a program through staffing.
I'm not, it's not a criticism, but at one time it was, when this whole thing started, because I was on the board when it started, I mean, way back in the day, it was a mission between a nonprofit, the city, and the district to work together to solve a problem for the children in the community. And now it's come to, we're not that, and we don't want that, or we don't want to be a part of that. That's what it feels like to me, is that y'all just want to push it away. And I think that's the challenge that I have, because they all are of our kids, and as many have mentioned here this evening, they're all a part of our community, not just because they come into our buildings to learn. They walk on your streets. We're all a part of that group. So I guess for me, just hearing the disinterest in the city's desire, whether it's to carry the contract or to continue to be a part of this, everybody's looking for the off-ramp, if that's the term that we've used. That to me says everything. That this group doesn't want to have that partnership with the district or AOB or anybody. That's not your core mission. It certainly isn't ours, but you're looking for someone to hang it on. That's what it feels like.
I would push back on that we're definitely not looking for somebody to hang it on. That's why we spent years collaborating with your staff, with KOB Inc. founders. Councilor Geary and myself spent I don't know how many hours trying to get to the bottom of a sustainable model to move forward. And what we realized was that the dream of KOB and a city-run program, what other city can you point to in the state of Oregon that runs an after-school program? You can't. So, and then you look at the equity lens of how we are doing enrollment. You look at Memorial, prime example, 70 to 80% of students year after year for the history of KOB were school district staff that were taking slots, so then underprivileged kids couldn't get into that program because their parents could wait on the steps at the community center in August and enroll when underprivileged kids' parents didn't have that opportunity. And then you look at the type of care that was being provided. They were, federally work programs through Linfield. Like, yes, those kids they had their heart in the right place, and they were going most likely through educational programs and eventually became student teachers and now are educators. I know some of them were, because some of my KOB teachers were teachers in this district and were a teacher for me down the road. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about apples to apples, what Campfire is providing is way more equitable. It's a lottery system. It's not who your last name is in this town. It's looked at through the multiple equity things that Josh lined out. And so to hide behind, we don't want to do a facility use agreement like we do for every other entity that uses our facilities in the school district, because of equity or cost, just doesn't compute. The data doesn't support it. And as far as not wanting to be a partner, I'm more than happy to be a partner, and I believe the city is more than happy to be a partner. That's why Susan's put in the countless hours on her docket as a department head to see this through and make sure that it's successful. And that's why we as a city had no issue extending this a year, because we want it to be successful and we want to give you guys the runway that it needs. But at the end of the day, if we're not the entity providing the staffing like we did from 1990 to 2016, why would we be the one administering a contract with a child care provider? They're not our facilities. They're not our staff. We're not the ones doing the background checks. We're not the ones, that have staff in those buildings knowing those students and those students' needs. So why would the city be the one holding that contract? It makes no sense.
I have a question, if you're kind of through that, specifically for the school board members that have been on here for some time. And I'm going to tell you first why I'm asking it, and then I'm going to ask the question. I'm asking this question because I feel like this is new information to you. It feels like new information. When you're saying the city doesn't want to be a partner, I find that shocking for multiple reasons, including the fact that we immediately said extend this contract if you don't have a plan figured out, but more so because that IGA was formed collaboratively. So my question is, was the school board involved, or did the school board review that IGA the way the council did? Because we all had a very clear set of expectations of what would happen, because it was laid out literally in black and white in front of us. And I will say, from our first meeting, when you brought this up, Chair, I was just shocked, because we had this multi-year agreement that everybody had access to, but maybe the school board wasn't shown the IGA, and maybe it was done at the executive level, and maybe that's why you feel kind of walloped or taken off guard, or as though we're walking away from a partnership while we in fact are trying to finalize the plans that we made together and signed off on. So that's the question. Were you shown the IGA?
I was not.
I was not.
Yeah,
But it's come up recently, so, excuse me, I should use, it has come up in the last few months, so I would imagine that as new board members, we would have received a copy, even though we weren't potentially on board at the time it was done.
You're speaking of something within the last 18 months, is what you're referring to, correct?
No, although we did just extend the contract, so there was something within the last 18 months. What I'm talking about was the 2018 or 2019 agreement that the school district and the city came to together, that specifically detailed how the next years would go, and it envisioned and it set up this dynamic in which the school district was supposed to take over. That's what's spelled out in the IGA. And I believe that's why the council is kind of a little baffled at why there's this pushback, and we don't quite understand this why on the contract. But as I've been listening,
and as I said, in our first meeting, it felt like it was new information to you, but that doesn't make any sense to me. It should have been before your board.
I don't recall seeing anything.
Well, it's,
Whether it's 2018 or within the last 18 months, but
and I can't speak for that, Mayor, but I did write that same question down, and it was mainly to you, Susan, on your second to last slide, and it was the 2019 three-year runway, and so my question was it the understanding of the current superintendent and the board, to your best of your knowledge, that this would transition to the district solely for that contract?
Could you say that again, please?
In 2019, on your second to last slide, it's talked about the three-year quote-unquote runway.
Yeah.
And my question that I wrote down was it your understanding that the current superintendent and board had the clear understanding that they solely were going to take on the contract for after-school care?
I wasn't at the meetings where the conversation happened between the school board and the superintendent. In fact, I don't know which superintendent it was, so I can't represent what the school board or the superintendent knew. All I can represent is the language in the agreement, which said that the city was going to not be the administrator of the contract.
That I get.
Yeah.
But was there an understanding by Dr. Russell and the current board that the district would take that on in some sort of language or some sort of video or something, to where the district or the superintendent said, we understand, you're giving us this runway, we got it, we'll take it?
I was not in a meeting, but only through the negotiations of the IGA, where we went back and forth with the draft language. I would assume that would be a part of it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have School Board Member Benner next. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Thank you. I can't remember why but I guess I want to lead with it's getting late. I'm hearing words that are not collaborative on both sides. And I think that I'd like to lead with the reason we're flustered on this is because we're all frickin' passionate about doing what's best for kids. And whether we're tied up in the weeds about that, it's important to remember that everybody that serves on the school board would not be doing this sort of work if we were not passionate about kids. And I am confident that all the city council members have the same passion for those kids. And so I'm disappointed that we're down in the weeds wrestling over who carries the contract. But I think it's important that we show grace to each other about the fact that we're in the weeds about something because we want best for kids. So back to the history, I worked with Dr. Russell. I know for sure she had no intention of taking over the contract at the end of 3 years. Just working with her, hearing the way I learned about Kids on the Block was through Dr. Russell and her passion for having a program that was available, but it's not a school program. And so I think that we have a clear misunderstanding between the boards about what the city council thought was going to happen and what the school board thought was going to happen. And I don't think there's any fault to that, but it's clear that the city council has a very clear idea of how this was going to end, and it's different than what the school board had in mind. I think that there's probably multiple opportunities to get out of that, but I don't know that it's going to benefit us too much by continuing to argue how that ends.
Thank you. I appreciate that. First of all, I haven't heard anything bad said here, or
you guys are more.
Well, people are passionate.
Yeah,
This is a passionate. I think everybody feels passionate, like you said, and we're passionate because these are our children, and we care about what happens to them.
I think that you have two people sitting in this room that were in that committee that worked closely with the school district that would completely contradict you. So I agree with you, we don't need to go back and forth, but having had extensive conversations with Council President and with Councilor Geary that talked about that those joint meetings and the wind down or the runway or whatever you want to call it, the 3 years. I think they would just, I hear you say, Mary Alice did not intend that. I know they would say that that was 100% what was discussed in those rooms and the intention of that. So we can have an impasse. That's fine. I think it's okay for us to have not just passionate, but it's okay. I think that we had some of this because we don't have clarity, right? I mean, we're still kind of trying to ask, like, what questions are we really trying to ask and get answered in this? And that initial question of what are our next steps, I feel like we're still trying to figure out what that is and having a little trouble with shared language around this maybe, but also that's because I feel like we didn't come to the table with the same information. And that's too bad. I know we've attempted to, and I mean, I know everybody got this packet, but it certainly is more difficult if the members of the council had all of, years of background information that has been informing their expectations and their opinions, et cetera, versus if you'd never seen the IGA, that is kind of the root of this conversation, right? It's what are the next steps now that the IGA is over? Other than we extended the IGA for a year because there were no planned next steps. So where we do need to move towards is what are some next steps? How are we going to give some direction so that this isn't just a conversation that's spinning? I'll refrain from saying around what, but so it's not just spinning, because we could come back here and have the same conversation in 6 months with the same presentation, and we could make these various points. I heard opportunity in fundraising and in not only creative fundraising, but potential for collaborative fundraising. I know there are capacity issues in every organization here. I'm hyper aware of that. Budget, staffing, we have those same challenges. I'm definitely interested in what creative fundraising can go forward. I'm still a little lost on the contractual part, but I hear you not wanting to try to wrestle that out in this room. That that's great. That is really more of an administrative function, and I do think that we can, I think there's also a lot of maybe passive ways of fundraising that we're overcomplicating. Where's the button on the school website and on the city website right up top front that says donate to after school care here? That just goes into that. Where are some of those really low barrier solutions to just kind of jumpstart some things other than talking about the things we don't necessarily see eye to eye on. I really appreciated hearing all of the ways that Campfire has brought equity to this programming. And I would love to, I think that's a critical part of going forward. I'm sorry we had to lose Councilor Payne tonight, but I know, she's a great representation of that as a parent of a neurodivergent child and who has a very high needs child. And I think it's wonderful that we're sitting in a group where we have a variety of perspectives, including former students, board members that have been with the school district for a long time, teachers, there is really a wonderful eclectic group of think around this. So I would like us to think collectively a little more moving forward. I took your note on it's late. It is 9:10 currently.
I'll say, let's definitely leave here no later than 9:30 tonight. That's, I think, kind of a reasonable time frame with some closing thoughts. So I'm going to hand this momentarily over to our city manager, who we haven't really heard from this evening, and then I would love to look for some forward-looking thoughts, ideas, as we kind of wrap up for tonight, or any very definite next steps that are clear in your mind of how we go forward. City manager.
I'm actually going to propose a different approach. Rather than trying to summarize a 3-hour and 10-minute meeting over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to suggest to you that I'm very envious of Dr. Brockett's penmanship. It's amazing. Amazingly good. I also think, as good as her notes are, that Claudia and Charisse have better notes than the two of us combined. Give us a chance to summarize the take-home points that we've heard tonight. I heard a lot of points of aspiration and a lot of points of agreement, and some things that we still have to work on. I'd suggest that you congratulate yourselves on a really robust and thoughtful and intentional and passionate conversation, and give us a chance to summarize that information that we heard tonight and feed it back to you, and then talk about what our next steps are.
I am amenable to that, other than if anybody has a burning desire to add any commentary, or if there's anything that has been left unsaid.
I would just add, I think we have all the essential components. I just don't think we've figured out how to put them all together yet. We have the wherewithal, we have the will, we have the passion. As I said, we have the component pieces. I just think we still need to figure out how to put it all together. We have a very well-run program, and have we fully used their capacity in terms of programming and so forth? So maybe that's more to look into. But I do think we have a lot of it already, and we just have to figure out how we can pull it all together, because I also have appreciated the conversation. We are all clearly very, very passionate about this topic, and I appreciate everybody's speaking up.
I just want to say thank you to all school staff and board and Superintendent Brockett for another great work session. It's a difficult conversation. I think we've had a lot of things out on the table tonight, and I don't come to a joint work session just to listen and say sounds great. I come to a joint work session to have a collaborative policy discussion. So if any of my comments seemed a little abrasive, they weren't intended that way, and thank you for putting up with me tonight.
Chair, do you want any final thoughts?
I'm sure you're going to, Mayor, but thank our guests tonight. We appreciate you both being here. Josh, thank you for all you do for our kids. It is such, as you could see and feel here in this room, such a passionate issue that we all of us here truly are appreciative for you and your staff's work. I don't have anything else, Mayor, unless you want me to adjourn.
Yeah, I ditto, and yes, please go ahead and adjourn.
I will adjourn the McMinnville Board of Directors at 9:14.
Thank you, and I will now adjourn the special called joint work session meeting at 9:14.